Chapter 976. Not long after, the four of them were called to the Yang residence. In the small courtyard with the battle command sign, Yang Qindong told them about his worries. The three of them were so shocked that their faces tightened. It was obvious that the four of them did not believe the news when they first heard it. However, no one could be sure about politics. It was common for friends to be enemies the next day. When the benefits could sway people's hearts, anything could happen. We've just sent so much rations to Northern Ming and now they're coming back to do us harm. This is too much of a beast. City Lord Yumian was so angry that his beard was trembling. It was obvious that he was angered by Bai Ming's shamelessness. Tiger's mane was not any better. He punched the sand table. As expected, we can't be too kind. We were willing to take the risk to help Bai Ming, but how did they treat us? Even if those things were given to a dog, it would at least wag its tail at us. Sometimes humans are worse than animals. Shi Bi, who was known as a wise man, said angrily. This person, who Yang Qindong said was calm in the face of danger, had a big picture and was a strategist, could not help but show an angry expression. Young master, just tell us what to do. Yang Si was even more direct. He was waiting for orders angrily. Yang Qindong was also angry, but he was more realistic. He knew that being angry wouldn't solve all the problems. What he needed to do now was to solve the difficulties in front of him and make more preparations before the war began. He shouldn't be cursing and scolding here and there. There was no practical meaning to it. Alright, everyone, calm down. When it comes to anger, I am angrier than any of you. Now let's talk about what we need to prepare. Yumian, you go first. Yes. Suppressing his anger, Yumian quickly got into character and said, when the origin city was first built, we had already considered the possibility of being surrounded one day, so we had already made preparations. The outer city wall is 150 feet tall and sturdy. It's definitely the type that's easy to defend and difficult to attack. Even if the outer city wall is breached, the moat between the inner city wall and the outer city wall is enough to withstand thousands of soldiers and horses. Moreover, the army has prepared enough food and fodder. There is no need to be afraid of being surrounded, and the possibility of being breached is even lower. However, there is no way to take care of the grain fields outside the city. We will be able to harvest in 2 months. If we fight to defend the city, I am afraid that we will suffer great losses in this aspect. Young master, can't we take the initiative to kill our way out? Didn't you always say that the best way to avoid losses is to set the battlefield in the enemy's territory? This time can we? Tiger's mane's face turned red when he heard that the hundreds of thousands of acres of crops waiting to be harvested might be destroyed. The food in the city depended on this land for the coming year. There were also many people who relied on farming for a living. They were also waiting for the moment of harvest. If it was destroyed like this, it would be heartbreaking. Yang Qindong answered in a resolute and decisive manner. This time, just the combined forces of Walla and Ili Ali alone are as many as 300,000 soldiers, which is more than 8 times the strength of our regular army. If we still choose to fight them head-on, even if we have to wear them down, they will wear us down. Whether it is Yes Hen or Lip, they are not ordinary people. They are both experts in using troops. It will be too difficult to turn the tables in such a disadvantageous situation. Only by defending can we show our advantage. Moreover, this time we don't know the situation of Bai Ming. If they also join in this war, then we will have to face more than 10 times the enemy, he. Yang Qindong did not continue speaking, but the anger flashing in the corner of his eyes showed his mood at the moment. From the time he established Xianxia's forces until now, this was the first time Yang Qindong faced such a dilemma. In the past, although there were people who had ideas about him, the difference in strength between the two sides was not too big. As long as he found the right path and the right opportunity, he could fight. But this time, in the face of more than 8 times the military strength, unless Yang Qindong used guns and cannons, it would be very difficult to turn the situation around with just the collision of cold weapons. Unfortunately, Yang Qindong did not have a cold front by his side. The closest was the Haiwu division in North Korea, but it would take at least 20 days to reach the first city from there. If there was a Bai Ming army obstruction along the way, it would take even longer. Distant water can't quench a present thirst. It would not work to put hope on them. Moreover, even if it was the C's 5th Division that came, they would not be able to defeat an enemy of more than 300,000 cavalry soldiers in a single blow. Of course, Yang Qindong had a large warehouse with him. If he wanted, he could take out a lot of firearms, but how many people would use them? And how could such a thing be explained? If only 1 or 2 weapons were taken out, it could be said that they were prepared in advance. However, it was impossible not to arouse suspicion when tens of thousands of guns or even more were taken out. It could only be said that things had not reached an irreversible situation, and Yang Qindong did not need to take the risk. Without enough firearms, Yang Qindong could only hope to defend the city. Looking at the 4 people in front of him, Yang Qindong actually had a smile on his face. Everyone, if a city wants to mature, it must experience a lot of things. It's time to test the first city. As long as we unite, there is no difficulty that we can't overcome, and there is no hurdle that we can't cross. We have to use facts to tell everyone that the defense line of the first city is strong. I'll leave the rest to you. Young master, tell us what to do. Tiger's mane patted his chest and said loudly. 6th young master, give the order. Yu Mian, Shibi and Yang Si also expressed their opinions in unison. Okay, I'll give the order next. You can supplement it at any time. Yang Qindong's eyes also revealed a very determined gaze. Order the army guarding Saihan Mountain to immediately withdraw to the city. Order the world's 1st Cavalry Division and the Tatar Division to guard the road out of the city to the northwest to strictly prevent anyone from threatening the safety of North Desert City and other places. Order to immediately start a recruitment operation in the city, mainly the soldiers in the Logistics Division. Strive to build a regular army in a short period of time. I don't want to see my soldiers rush onto the battlefield and die innocently because their military quality is not good enough. Order the city to be under martial law immediately and use a method of relaxation on the outside. Anyone who enters the city is not allowed to leave without a special pass. Order the city to bury more mines beside the grain fields outside the city. If we choose not to take that grain field, then no enemy will be able to take it away. As for the people who grow the grain, they will be handed over to City Lord Yu. You will be responsible for telling them that we will compensate them no matter how much they lose, and there must not be any internal strife. Telegram the city to order the C-5th Division in North Korea to immediately reinforce the city. Orders were issued from Yang Qindong's mouth. The 4 of them kept nodding their heads in agreement. Regardless of the time, the 4 of them would immediately supplement if they thought of something. A preparation work for the defense of the city was in full swing. Considering that there must be a lot of enemy spies in the city, the 4 outer cities did not seem to have any changes. However, at the city gate of the inner city, everyone had already stopped going out of the city. In this way they could also buy some time to prepare for the defense of the first city. 3 days after the meeting, the world's 1st Cavalry Division and the Tatar Division left the city. No one knew where they went. They disappeared into the vast grassland as soon as they left the city. 4 days later, a large number of mines and other things were transported out of the city. The new Army's Recruit Division and the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division went out late and returned early every day. They prepared one trap after another outside the hundreds of thousands of acres of grain field, waiting for the enemy to appear and scatter the flowers. 7 days later, the Wara Army and the Ili Army finally moved. They suddenly gave up besieging Sambasachurn city and moved towards the first city. This move was a joint decision made by Yes Hen and Alip. Just a day ago, they suddenly discovered that the spies they sent into the first city to gather information had not returned. This gave the 2 of them a very bad feeling. Although the spies could still continuously send back information with the help of gerfalcons, indicating that there was nothing unusual on the surface, the 2 of them were not so easy to fool. As soon as there was an accident, they thought of the same question. Did Yang Qindong already see through their battle plan? Where the problem was and how their intentions would be seen through, the 2 of them did not have the time to think about it. Since there was a danger of being discovered, they should take the initiative to attack. After all, the advantage was in their hands. The enemy at the 4 city gates suddenly withdrew. This made the Xian Mansion's chief soldier Shi Wanshan, who had been nervous, puzzled. During this period of time his days were not easy at all. Although the soldiers at the city gates had not launched an attack, the nerves in his mind had been tense. He really did not know when the enemy would suddenly launch an attack. Every night he would think about whether the enemy would launch an attack on the city the next morning. Would he be able to defend the city? That kind of day was more than just torture. However, no one would have thought that the enemy would withdraw from the city gates. At this moment he actually had a surreal feeling. Deputy Chief Soldier Ancient River Ning Wenfeng, and the army supervisor eunuch Deng Chong appeared on the city gate tower together. Seeing the enemy disappear from under their eyes, they were all at a loss. Everything that was happening in front of them also made them feel a sense of bewilderment. What do you think they are doing? Holding the battlements, Zhou Xian seemed to be asking the others, but also seemed to be talking to himself. They are not pretending to retreat in order to lure us out of the city, right? Deputy Chief Soldier Ancient River's personality was straightforward, and his words were more direct. Chapter 977. The supervising eunuch Deng Chong was in a better state. He looked in the direction of the enemy's retreat and said worriedly, "They are heading in the direction of Talu City. Are they going to abandon us and choose another path?" "I don't think so." Deputy Chief Ancient River's face was filled with shock. He shook his head hesitantly. "I don't think so. If they don't attack us and go to attack Talu City, they will face the danger of being attacked from both sides at any time. Moreover, didn't the imperial court send news? Governor Shiheng is leading an army of 200,000. If they go to Talu City, they should be able to meet them. At that time we will attack them from both sides. They won't be able to gain any benefits." Ning Wenfeng, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. He denied Deng Chong's worries. "Then why are they going there? If they are retreating, shouldn't they retreat to the south? Could it be that they are really trying to lure us out of the city?" Deng Chong nodded in agreement. However, a new doubt rose in his mind. To the north there is not only Talu City but also Beginning City. Ning Wenfeng's expression changed slightly. When he said the last two words, his face had already turned red. Although his possibility was the lowest, it seemed that this was the only plausible explanation. Ning Wenfeng's words attracted the attention of the three people. It was Ancient River who said, "Impossible. You said that they want to attack Beginning City. They must be crazy. The Duke of Loyalty is there. Moreover, Beginning City has high walls. How can it be so easy to attack?" "That's right." Chief Zhou Xian spoke again. "Moreover, we are still behind them. If they attack Beginning City now, aren't they afraid that we will stab them in the ass and cut off their retreat?" A while ago, Yang Qindong sent people to deliver provisions into the city. Although it wasn't because of Zhou Xian's face, and if he guessed correctly, it should be because of some agreement between the Duke of Loyalty and the Emperor. However, there was one point that couldn't be denied, and that was that nearly 200,000 of their soldiers had been saved. He had to acknowledge this favor. If Walla and Commander Ely really wanted to attack Beginning City, he could also lead the army to cut off the enemy's retreat and severely injure them. "That's right. The 5-star army has helped us a lot this time. If something happens to them, we can't just ignore it." Ancient River nodded silently. It was said that the more straightforward a person's personality, the more they would know how to be grateful. Now it was a perfect example of this saying. "Send scouts out of the city. Rather than discussing it here, why don't we send people out to scare them? Seeing is believing." Ning Wenfeng's mind was still clear enough. Faced with a chaotic situation that he couldn't understand, he still decided to send someone to take a look. Only then could he get the truest answer. "Okay, send out all the scouts." Zhou Xian nodded in acquiescence. In his heart he was also very curious about what Walla and the others were going to do. Walla and Ely took the allied army of 300,000 men into consideration. Jingzhou City and Shajing City each kept 5,000 cavalrymen, and when they attacked Sambulachuan City, they lost nearly 10,000 infantrymen. They calmly left Sambulachuan City and in a grandiose manner headed straight for Shi City, which was 1,000 li away. As early as the moment they started to move, the scouts of the 5-star army, who were already mentally prepared, received the news and then reported it back to Beginning City. Yang Qindong, who was having lunch with 6th Madame Wan Xiaoyu, only paused for a moment after hearing Beta Persei's report. Then he continued to eat as if nothing had happened, and a confident smile appeared on his face from time to time. Wan Xiaoyu sat opposite him and there was no trace of worry on her face. Although the number of 300,000 troops reported by Beta Persei had indeed shocked her, she was convinced that her man would still create a miracle this time when she thought of all the miracles she had seen after meeting her big brother. Through the Beginning City's Yang report, the news of the 300,000 troops under Walla and Ely Ali's joint attack quickly spread in the city. Yang Qindong adopted an extremely open policy regarding public opinion. At his request, Yang Bao even had a special current affairs column for everyone to express their personal views and opinions on current affairs. It was precisely because of this that anyone who had lived in Beginning City for more than a year seemed to be able to talk about some important matters regarding Xianxia. Over time, discussing the military situation had become a habit. It was no longer strange for them to do so. It was precisely because of this foundation that when Yang Bao of Beginning City announced this shocking news the next morning, the city was far from the panic that should have occurred. Some of the commoners originally wanted to buy more rice to store, but when they saw the piles of rice in front of the grain stores in the city, they no longer had any concerns. Only those farmers who had fields outside the city were worried and even sent some representatives to the city lord's mansion to inquire. And they agreed. The Heaven Khan said that all the losses this time would be compensated by the 5-star army. After the war they would compensate for the losses. City Lord Yumian also emphasized that these compensations were not provided by the Heaven Khan, but by Walla and Ili Ali. The city lord's mansion was just supporting them in advance. That's right, we're going to get Walla and Ili Belly to compensate us. The Heaven Khan is so good to us and gave us fields, houses to live in, food to eat and hope for the future. However, some people just don't like it and always want to snatch the benefits. Since that's the case, we'll fight with them. We'll fight with them, but I don't know if we still need people to defend the city. I'm only in my 40s and I still have a lot of strength. Although I can't charge into battle without training, I can still help carry the kerosene and arrows. There's also me. I'm not even 40 years old yet. I can carry a shoulder and pull a bow. If you need me, I'll go up to the city tower and fight with these people who deserve to die. Count me in. My family has 5 brothers. Even without me we can still live. If there's a need, we can go up to the city tower to help. It's free. We can bring our own food. In front of the city lord's mansion, after those farmers received the promise, they immediately felt that the 5-star army was cute. Returning the favor, each of them also showed their attitude. It was true that those who had money would contribute money and those who had strength would contribute strength. This kind of atmosphere quickly became the norm in the city. For a time, there were many people who requested to help defend the city. There were nearly 500,000 people in the city. Other than some children and the elderly, almost everyone else signed up. The number of people actually reached more than 300,000. When this matter was reported to City Lord Yumian, he excitedly told the news to Yang Chendong. The latter couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yumian, do you see that? This is the power of the people. Their thinking is actually very simple. Whoever is good to them, they will be good to them. In this way we have more than 300,000 fresh troops. Isn't that much more than the enemy? What's there to be afraid of? Yes, the 6th young master is right. Yumian nodded excitedly. Previously, I was worried that the strength to defend the city wasn't enough. However, with the support of the people in the city, there's no need to worry. Yang Chendong finally saw the power of the people. At that time, with these people doing the logistics work in addition to the new army's main force, the reserve officers and soldiers in the logistics division, as well as the captives and soldiers, he already had enough confidence to fight with any force. One had to know that not long ago, they had just taken in nearly 60,000 Baiming deserters. Just this force alone was already considered very large. Since Walla's goal was already very clear, there was no intention of hiding some of their actions in the beginning city. The outer and inner city gates were closed one after another, showing a posture of strict defense. The performance of the beginning city fell into the eyes of Walla's scouts outside the city. They quickly reported the news. After Yeshen and Apuli, who were hurrying on their way, learned about it, their faces were relaxed and at ease. Although the beginning city's actions were so fast that it was somewhat out of their expectations, they did not know if the Heavenly Khan was conceited or if they had no way out and insisted on smashing an egg against a rock because they wanted to stop their army of 300,000 with less than 40,000 soldiers. Yeshen rode on his horse and looked at Apuli, who was beside him, and asked, "Lord Prime Minister, how should the current situation be described in the language of the Han people?" Apuli pondered for a moment before giving the answer. It should be called not knowing the time and things, or it can also be called a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Powell said, "Lord Prime Minister is indeed knowledgeable. By the way, there won't be any problems with the Baiming army, right? You have to know that our escape route is in their hands. There mustn't be any problems." Yeshen laughed and said worriedly, Since the Emperor of Beiming has already agreed, he will definitely not go back on his word. What's more, in his eyes, we and the 5-star army are his enemies. He will definitely not intervene in such a good show. When it came to this issue, Apuli was very confident. Good. Next we will send troops to the beginning city. I heard that there are mountains of gold and silver, piles of food and groups of slaves there. I didn't expect the Heavenly Khan to be a good person for once and prepare so many good things for us. Without any worries, Yeshin's face was carefree and at the same time his face was full of expectations. Sambu's Tile River City. The dispatched scouts reported back one by one. After confirming the fact that the beginning city's gate was closed and the alliance of Walla and Ili Ali was advancing step by step, they quickly reported back to the city. General Shi Wanshan immediately invited the 2 vice-generals Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng to prepare for the attack. They actually dared to jump over us to attack the beginning city. This is simply not putting us in their eyes. Since that's the case, this time we will show them our power. General Ancient River, I will give you 30,000 troops. Once the attack and defense of the beginning city begins, you will immediately lead the troops to attack Shajing City and Wenfeng City. I will also give you 30,000 troops to attack Jingzhou City. We will cut off their escape route first. Shi Wanshan's face was filled with anger. Chapter 978. He did not know where the other party got the guts to abandon him and attack the beginning city behind him. However, since there was such an opportunity, he would of course attack quickly in order to obtain more victories and greater victories. Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng, who were called out, cupped their fists and responded. Then they prepared to mobilize the troops to attack the city. However, before they could walk out of the government office, they saw a group of more than 100 embroidered uniform guards surrounding the place. Then the military supervisor eunuch, Deng Chong, appeared. What are you doing? Seeing that the government office was surrounded and the embroidered uniform guards appeared, Shi Wanshan's expression changed slightly. He looked at Deng Chong, who was walking toward him, and asked sternly. Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng, who were about to leave after receiving the military order, looked at Deng Chong in confusion. At the same time, their right hands slowly moved toward their waists. It was obvious that they were prepared to make a move at any time. Don't misunderstand. Deng Chong's expression did not change and his heart did not skip a beat. It was as if he did not see the reaction of the 2 deputy commanders. He faced Shi Wanshan and said, Commander Shi, I just received a secret order from Supervisor Jin. The Xian Mansion soldiers are not allowed to leave Sanbula City. Please do not make things difficult for them. After saying this, Deng Chong waved his hand to the embroidered uniform guards on his left and right and said, Guards, guard every path leading out of the government office. Without orders, the 3 commanders are not allowed to leave the government office. Otherwise, kill them without mercy. After the embroidered uniform guards in flying fish robes responded, they quickly occupied every path and completely controlled Shi Wanshan and the other 2 in the small courtyard. After everything was done, Deng Chong waved his hand again. Immediately, a few eunuchs brought out the good wine and dishes that had been prepared in advance and brought them to the table. Deng Chong was the first to find a seat and sit down. Speaking of which, I rarely have the chance to have a good drink with the 3 generals. Come take a seat. With a face full of doubt, Ancient River signaled Shi Wanshan with his eyes several times. What should he do? Although it was true that there were embroidered uniform guards in the vicinity, this was not the imperial city. In this city, there were close to 200,000 Beiming army. They could be deployed at any time. Just relying on these embroidered uniform guards was not enough to scare them. Ancient River only needed to shout, and some of the nearby soldiers and patrolling soldiers would rush over to help him control the situation. Shi Wanshan naturally understood Ancient River's intentions, but he did not agree to do so. It was clear that Deng Chong's actions today were not his own. It was the head eunuch Jin Ying's idea. It was very likely the emperor's idea. If he charged out now, it would be no different from a rebellion. In ancient times, rebellion was a great crime. It was punishable by death. How could Shi Wanshan take such a risk? He had never thought about it, nor had he prepared for it. He signaled to Ning Wenfeng with his eyes to keep an eye on Ancient River's deputy head eunuch. He then sat down across from Deng Chong and sternly asked, Eunuch Deng, what is the meaning of this? Right now Walla and Commander Ili's army is marching toward the first city. A major battle is unavoidable. This is the time for us to strike. Soon Shajing and Jingzhou will belong to the Baiming. Deng Chong sighed. He had been in the city all this time, so how could he not understand this principle? 2 hours ago he had also been thinking this. After all, the Xian mansion guards had performed a great service, and as an army eunuch he had received many benefits. But who would have thought that just a moment ago, a eunuch from the imperial palace of the capital had come to see him, even taking out a letter personally written by Ji Ning. The letter explained in detail that the Xuanfu soldiers could not take advantage of the situation to make trouble for Walla and Ili, or else they would be ruining the plans of the imperial court. She also ordered that if Shi Wanshan and the other two did not listen to her advice, they could be arrested on the spot and escorted back to the capital. Regardless of whether Deng Chong accepted the order or not, he had to carry it out. That was the reason for the current situation and also the reason for his current sigh. Head eunuch, sure, we are just serving the imperial court. This is an order from above. All we have to do is to obey. Don't you think so? Deng Chong did not explain anything. He did not know what to explain, so he could only use orders to suppress people. What is it? You clearly have a good opportunity to attack, but you don't do anything? The straightforward and fiery deputy head eunuch Ancient River also walked over. Before he arrived, his questioning voice had already been heard. Deng Chong was not angry when he heard this. He just shook his head and said, I don't know whether it is an opportunity to attack or not. But since it is an order from above, we have to obey. Deputy head eunuch Gu, do you want to disobey the order? Ancient River still wanted to argue. Shi Wanshan spoke up. That's enough. General Ancient River, restrain your temper. Don't be impatient. Yes. Even if we want to send troops, we can't do it in such a hurry. Since we have already brought good wine and good dishes, how can we waste them and not eat them? Another deputy head eunuch Ning Wenfeng chuckled and sat down at the table. He even picked up his chopsticks and looked like he was going to eat a big piece. The smart Ning Wenfeng had already realized that the order from above did not allow them to send troops. Rather than stubbornly resisting and provoking anger, it was better to sit down and have a good chat to see if they could find out what went wrong. Shi Wanshan quickly understood Ning Wenfeng's intentions and suppressed the anger in his heart. Only Ancient River was left. Seeing that he wouldn't be of much use even if he stood, he simply sat down and took a big bowl of wine to relieve the depression in his heart. Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng raised their wine cups to toast Deng Chong. Eunuch Deng Chong, who knew their intentions, smiled bitterly. Generals, don't ask me what is going on. To be honest, I don't know either. But I think you guys should be able to guess it. Whatever you guess, that's what it is. I only know that the reinforcements sent by the Emperor Governor Shi Heng are currently leading troops in the Jiong Pass area and are not moving forward. When Deng Chong said this, Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng had nothing to say. Although it was only a piece of information, it already told them too much. The reinforcements were not in a hurry to come. Instead, they were not moving forward. This was the attitude of the imperial court. In other words, they didn't have the intention to start a war with Walla and Ili. Instead, they wanted to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. How long had it been since the Walla coalition army left and the imperial court had already sent the news? It could be seen that this was not something unexpected. It had been prepared for a long time. In other words, the Walla coalition army bypassed them and directly contacted the higher-ups. They even contacted the emperor and got the result they wanted. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so assured to leave their way out and rush straight to the first city. When they thought of this result, the four of them didn't look good. This drinking session wasn't very enjoyable. After a while, Deng Chong left first. When he left a sentence, "Please stay in this magistrate court. If you need anything, even if it's a woman, you can tell the brothers of the embroidered uniform guards. They will fulfill all your wishes." This was equivalent to house arrest. Deng Chong left, and the group of embroidered uniform guards also disappeared from their sight. But it could be imagined that once they made a move, they would immediately appear from the darkness. The three dignified commanders who held heavy military forces were actually placed under house arrest when the war was about to start. This unhappiness made Ancient River the first to get angry. He threw the wine jar on the ground, opened his eyes and shouted, "What's going on? What is the meaning of this? Are you repaying kindness with ingratitude? Brother Gu, be careful with your words. Shi Wanshan's face changed after hearing this. Ning Wenfeng, who was at the side, was even more direct. He slashed out with his palm and hit the back of Gu He's neck, knocking him unconscious. This was also something that couldn't be helped. They were surrounded by embroidered uniform guards. Some words were spread out, not only Ancient River, but they would also be guilty. Ancient River was knocked out, and it was as if the world had returned to peace. Only the whispers between Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng were left. "Commander, are we just going to watch the war start and do nothing? He had just helped us before. So what? Can we still disobey the orders from above? Everything we have is given by the Emperor and the court. The Emperor's orders cannot be disobeyed. But why? Is it because the higher-ups think they are clever? Don't they know that once the Walla army wins, they will immediately point their spears at us? At that time we won't have any allies. If we encounter any difficulties, who will help us? On the other hand, if the Duke of Loyalty wins, he will not let us off easily. It is not impossible for him to start a war with the Baiming army. Comparing our military strength, what are our chances of winning?" Shi Wanshan's cold laughter was heard. "The higher-ups? When have the higher-ups done anything right? They clearly said that they would give us 100,000 taels of silver as a reward, but they only got 10,000 taels of silver. Because of this, they almost caused a mutiny in the army. If they were smart, why would they do something like digging their own foundation? Counting on them." At this point, the air seemed to have frozen. The commander and deputy commander both stopped talking. They suddenly felt a sense of helplessness. If one did not seek death, one would not die. The Great Ming dynasty was originally prosperous, but because of the internal strife, the eunuchs monopolizing power, a dynasty was finally destroyed. However, at this moment, no matter how helpless or resentful the two commanders felt, all they could do was complain. Unless they wanted to rebel, they could only listen to the orders of the higher-ups. They did not even have the right to leave this government office. After a few days of traveling, the vanguard of the Walla and Ili army arrived at the foot of Saihan Mountain. When the scouts went up the mountain to investigate, they found that the place had long been empty. According to the scouts, the people on the mountain had been gone for a few days, not just 1 or 2 days. Chapter 979. The news quickly spread to the Middle Army, and Apu's expression became slightly gloomy after hearing it. The 5-star army gave up on defending Saihan Mountain for no reason. This could only mean one thing, that is, they had already guessed that they would attack the beginning city. In this case, the beginning city, which had been prepared for a long time, would not be as easy to attack as they thought. The army was about to set out, and they would not stop just because the other party was prepared. The army continued to move forward, relying on the absolute advantage in strength. This time Yeshen and Apu were determined to take down the beginning city. At the very least, they wanted to drive Yang Qindong out of the grassland. If possible, it would be best to kill him here. The army of 300,000 came in a mighty manner. Along the way, the green grassland became dry, revealing yellow or black ground. After all, there were too many war horses, and the amount of food consumed every day was an astronomical figure. After another 3 days of rushing, the army finally arrived at the so-called first city of the grassland. From a distance, the beginning city was like a heavenly pass standing on the grassland. It was like a heavenly beast that landed here, showing its domineering and mighty power. Is this the beginning city? It's really majestic. Riding on his warhorse, he came to the grassland that was 5 miles away from the beginning city. Looking up at the high city in the distance, he first expressed his true feelings. Prime Minister Apu, who also saw the beginning city for the first time, also showed a look of admiration. He sighed sincerely. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage of the Great Ming Dynasty is really an outstanding person. Just from the scale of this city, you can see that he has put in a lot of effort. This financial resources and this courage are not what ordinary people can achieve. But it will soon belong to us, won't it? After sighing, Yeshen's eyes showed a greedy look. Yes, it will soon belong to us. Apu was also inexplicably excited. The development of Ili in the past few years was not very satisfactory, and it was all thanks to the role played by him as the Prime Minister. If they could take down the first city and plunder a large amount of resources from there, it would definitely be a great stimulus to the domestic economy. Perhaps it would even lead to a great development. Xian was thinking about becoming the lord of the origin city. In this way, even if he lost a fight in the future, he wouldn't have to be like a stray dog with nowhere to go. At that time he would have the strength to attack and defend. At that time it was not impossible for his strength to double or even more. The two people in power gave the order for the army to set up camp with expectant expressions. In order to make the harvest this time even more abundant, they gave the order to surround the city on all sides. They were not allowed to let anyone or anything in the beginning city go. In the process of the army surrounding the city, more than 300,000 mu of grain fields appeared in front of them. For this matter, Xian and Alip even personally came to the scene. When they saw so much food about to grow, they couldn't help but feel excited. With this, their army's food problem could be considered solved. Therefore, the two of them gave the same order at the same time. They ordered that no one was allowed to destroy the grain fields that were still growing. In the end, the beginning city was surrounded. Looking down from the top of the city gate tower, there was a continuous stretch of barracks next to each other, and the densely packed silhouettes were like endless ants. Under Yang Qindong's intention, he deliberately opened the 4 inner city gates to allow ordinary people to go to the outer city to watch the enemy. This completely abnormal action immediately attracted countless people to go up the city tower to watch. Then many people saw too many enemies coming down the city tower. Their legs were still trembling. They were really frightened. After all, the 300,000 soldiers mentioned and the 300,000 soldiers in front of their eyes were two completely different concepts. For this matter, the city lord Yu Mian raised doubts. According to him, the people couldn't know too much. Otherwise, they would really be frightened and there might even be internal strife. Regarding this, Yang Qindong only said a few words. After enjoying peace for a long time, one will forget about war. Now let them feel the atmosphere before the war. It will only make them cherish peace and life even more, as well as the hard-won happy life now. In order to ensure that this kind of life can last, everyone must contribute their strength. The reason why Yang Qindong made this decision was based on his own reasons. In this battle, he didn't plan to use too much of the regular army. If possible, he wouldn't use a single regular army. The reserves were enough. Just like when he faced the 30,000 elite cavalry, Yang Qindong adopted a training method. In the end, he created the world's #1 cavalry division, which strengthened and increased the strength of the 5-star army's cavalry. This time he was still preparing to train the troops. Only real battles could produce elite troops. If they relied only on drills, it would be better if they encountered a favorable battle. However, once the situation became critical, it was hard to say what kind of decision they would make. Previously, Yang Qindong had decided to build another army after the new First Army. It would be called the new Second Army. However, he only gave a rough idea of how the new Second Army would be formed. Until now, when the city was besieged, he gave his final opinion and decision. The reserve soldiers would be qualified to become the new Second Army soldiers if they didn't die after guarding the city tower for 3 days. Soldiers could only become more mature after experiencing bloody battles and life and death situations. Perhaps there were some who were very brave, some who were both intelligent and courageous, and some who simply focused on evading and attacking. However, no matter what the result was, as long as they could stay on the city tower for 3 days without being harmed, it was enough to prove that they were capable and could be called a veteran. The facts had already proven that Yang Qindong wanted to build an elite army. He wanted to walk the path of elite soldiers. Moreover, he valued the lives of the soldiers very much. As long as there was a slight possibility, he would think of a way to ensure the safety of the soldiers. Under such principles, the new Second Army naturally couldn't be made up of only new soldiers. Otherwise, if they encountered a tough battle and suffered heavy losses, it wouldn't be what he wanted. The task of building the new Second Army was given, and the procedures for selecting the soldiers were also given. In order to ensure that there wouldn't be any accidents while training the soldiers, the 8,000 soldiers of the new First Army's recruit division also ascended the city tower. In principle, they didn't need to make a move unless there was an emergency. Training soldiers was fine, but if they lost the city and suffered a great defeat because of training soldiers, that wouldn't be what Yang Qindong wanted. Give them a sufficient number of bows and weapons. Tell them that if they want to become the glorious 5-star army soldiers, it's time to show off. After knowing that the 4 cities were surrounded and that not even a drop of water could trickle through, Yang Qindong unhurriedly gave a military order to the future commander of the new Second Army, Shibi. This young man, who was half Han and half Mongolian, had been put in an important position since he met Yang Qindong. He finally had the opportunity to shoulder the burden alone. For this important position, all Shibi had to do was to work hard and do his best. Yang Qindong was undoubtedly very relieved to leave this matter to Shibi. Therefore, when the war was about to arrive while everyone else was nervously busy, he accompanied Luan Xiaoyu in the Yang residence and taught her how to sing a new song and compose a new program. As a result, other than a group of generals coming in and out of the Yang residence every day, there was also a group of female soldiers from the publicity department who joined in the fun. Regarding this, it gave everyone the feeling that their sixth young master was too ambitious. However, it was this great ambition that gave everyone unparalleled confidence. Yang Qindong's indifference and confidence encouraged everyone. Gradually, more and more officers didn't take the war seriously. It took them 2 full days to surround the first city. Next, it was time for the army to set up camp. It took another 2 days for the 300,000 soldiers to prepare the siege weapons. When they arrived at the first city, they realized that the ladders that they had prepared before were still too short. The length was far from enough. The third city's Wuchuan city was only 50 to 60 feet high. The first city's tower was 150 feet high. The corresponding length of the ladder also had to be increased. This matter was difficult for the Walla coalition army. They had to send more soldiers to search for useful materials in the forest. At that time, without the help of firearms, the offensive was generally the same old 3 methods: shield carts, catapults, and ladders. Needless to say, ladders were used to climb up the city. The structure was simple. The catapult was a long-range offensive weapon. Its main purpose was to deter and suppress the enemy's arrows. Unfortunately, the stones in the grassland were not easy to find. Especially when the first city was being built, the nearby stones were dug up early. At this moment, the catapult became a gunpowder vehicle. Because the amount of gunpowder in the Walla coalition army was limited and the accuracy of the attack was not good, the power of the catapult was also greatly reduced. Finally, the shield carts. This was a wooden cart wrapped in a layer of cowhide to ensure that arrows couldn't easily penetrate it. In addition, the cowhide was soaked in water to ensure that it was impervious to fire and water. It was the best auxiliary method to get close to the city. At the same time, it was also one of the important weapons of the Walla coalition army when attacking the city. Among the 300,000 coalition army, most of the Walla coalition army were cavalry. There were also 50,000 infantrymen. This was also the main force of the siege. As long as they could attack the city tower and then rush down to open the city gate from the inside, the cavalry warriors could take the opportunity to kill their way into the city. At that time, they would still have the advantage of numbers. The first city would change hands and all the resources inside would be snatched away. Thank you, Prime Minister. Tomorrow was the day of the first attack. Yeshen looked at Alip with a pleading expression. Well said, well said. Alip nodded. Choosing the first city as the target was originally his first suggestion. Now that he had the infantrymen to attack the city, the first battle would naturally start with him. That night, Alip called the infantryman General Korban and gave him the order to attack the city tomorrow. Remember, on the first day of the siege you still have to test the waters. First, you have to find out the strength of the enemy. The outside world has always said that the 5-star army's combat power is extraordinary. You have to be careful. In fact, there is nothing to be afraid of. The advantage of the cavalry is to charge and kill, not to defend the city. So just do it. Chapter 980. Korban nodded confidently and said, "Don't worry, Prime Minister. Our 50,000 infantrymen will not let you down." On the 3rd day of the 8th lunar month 1455 AD, the first city defense war officially began. That morning the sun rose slowly and the sky was clear. The horn was officially blown, and the sound of soldiers marching on the ground could be heard from the 4 outer cities of the first city. The sound alarmed more than 50 people in the first city, and it made the 20,000 reserve soldiers on the city tower excited and nervous. The 20,000 reserve soldiers were divided into 4 cities, with 5,000 people in each city. This was the first batch of warriors from the logistics division who signed up for the war. The news of the establishment of the new Second Army had already spread in the city. For the reserve soldiers, this would be a great opportunity to officially step into the ranks of the Iron Warriors. They were all warriors, but the treatment of the regular army and the reserve soldiers was very different, which made many people unhappy. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Khan walked the path of the elite soldiers, which everyone knew. Even if you had a lot of skills, you lacked a platform to perform, which was a sad thing. Now the new Second Army was going to be established, and there were more than 20,000 official soldiers waiting for everyone, which made many people eager to try. But it seemed that 20,000 people were already a lot, and in comparison the competition was still there. Not to mention that there were 80,000 reserve soldiers in the logistics division and 60,000 newly captured soldiers. There were about 50,000 to 60,000 ambitious young people in the first city. Together there were 200,000 people, which was a ratio of almost 10 to 1, which made many people feel a lot of pressure. Those who did not die in the battle and defended the city tower for 3 days could join the army. The moment the news was announced, the applicants crowded the recruitment office of the new Second Army. If it was not for the fact that they were prepared, there would be a big problem. These 20,000 people were the first batch to sign up, and they were arranged into 4 echelons to guard the 4 cities. The outer city tower of the first city was spacious enough. Otherwise, it would not be able to accommodate so many warriors. There was a so-called safe passage behind each tower. Usually, Division Commander Lu Zhuo would lead the soldiers of the new army division to wait here, in case there was any problem, and they would fill in the gaps in time. This passageway also had another meaning. Once a soldier couldn't stand the baptism of war and felt afraid, he could retreat from here. He wouldn't be considered a deserter and wouldn't be punished, but he would be recorded and lose the opportunity to join the new Second Army. Such a humane design was to protect the lives of the soldiers to the greatest extent by Yang Chendong. After all, sometimes a person's death would lead to a disaster for a family. The war drums sounded under the city tower, and 2,000 infantry soldiers appeared under each tower. They walked in a uniform pace, push a shield cart, ladders, longbows, swords and shields. They walked slowly with heavy footsteps with a strong murderous aura. The soldiers of the First Army was the First Army's first, the soldiers of the First Army and first, the soldiers of the first into the First Army, soldiers of the first and first, the first of the first soldiers be soldiers men. Not all men were born warriors. There were many who didn't like the way of killing, and there were even some who were born cowards. This time they were fighting for honor and to protect the people of the city. That was why they stood up bravely. However, when they stood on the tower with bows and arrows in hand, they realized that war was not just talk. It was also not like what was described in the books, where the anger of an ordinary man would cause blood to splatter. It was a fight for life, a process of facing death, and the cruelest test of one's mind. The war had not yet begun, but the First Army soldiers patrolling the city saw all kinds of unbearable performances of the First Army soldiers. These soldiers, who had experienced countless battles of life and death, played the role of the pillars of the city. When they saw that some of the soldiers' performance was no different from normal, they did not say anything to humiliate them. Instead, they kept encouraging them. Everyone, don't panic and don't be afraid. Just perform well like you did in normal training. Remember, when you are brave enough and clever enough, even the arrows will avoid you. Only those who are truly panicking will become the target of the enemy's arrows. Everyone relax. In fact, we were very nervous when we fought for the first time. No one is not afraid of death, and no one is born a qualified and excellent soldier. Everything comes from countless experiences, but our war is not meaningless. Think about how we can ensure the safety of our families because of our efforts. Think about how our families and loved ones can live better and more dignified lives because of our efforts. Think about how our hands can lay down a peaceful land and supreme honor for our future generations. Warriors, let's fight. Victory will belong to you. Following the consolation of the veterans, graceful female propaganda soldiers appeared in the safety zone behind the city gate tower. Each of them was about 10 meters away from each other, ensuring that their voices could be heard everywhere on the city gate tower. Fellow recruits, the time to perform has come. The time to change your life has come. Think about your families who are waiting for your triumphant return. Think about your relatives and friends who are waiting for you. Show us your fearless and brave side. We will be with you. The sudden arrival of the beautiful female soldiers gave the new recruits an even greater boost of morale. After all, no man was willing to show his cowardly side in front of a woman. For a moment many of the soldiers became much calmer. Some of the soldiers who couldn't even hold their bows no longer trembled. Their eyes were more resolute and they appeared to be more resolute. Below the city the bugle horn sounded. It was no longer as dull as before and it became much more resounding. Less than 100 meters away from the foot of the tower, the infantry began their first wave of attack. Immediately arrows fell like rain. Ding ding dang dang they smashed around the shield carts. However, most of them were useless. Only a few managed to hit the enemy infantry. The gap between the recruits and the First Army soldiers was infinitely magnified at this moment. In a short period of time, tens of thousands of arrows were wasted. In exchange, the enemy suffered limited casualties. Fortunately, Yang Chendong and Shibi had long expected such a thing to happen. The bows used by the recruits were very crude. They were recently rushed out, so losing a few was not a big deal. The arrows that were shot fell on the First Army soldiers who were attacking the city, causing them to laugh. When they saw that the archery skills of the soldiers defending the city were so low, and the arrows were so crude, such opponents made them feel lucky and full of confidence at the same time. When the opponent's strength was infinitely reduced, it meant that they were one step closer to victory. Especially when the news reached the ears of the infantry commander General Korban, he couldn't help but laugh 3 times. Good. Seeing is really better than hearing 100 times. Everyone says that the 5-star Army's combat strength is tyrannical, and that it's difficult to be a match for them. But in my opinion it's pure nonsense. How about this? Increase the intensity of the attack and strive to break the city in 3 days. By then all the good things in the beginning city will be ours. Korban was not just talking to his subordinates, nor was it just to boost their morale. He also reported the news of taking down the beginning city in 3 days to Prime Minister Arab. Such bold words made Arab and Yeshen, who received the news, very excited. They originally thought that it would be a tough battle, but now it seemed that they had overestimated the Han army. Thinking about it, the Han people had always been synonymous with weakness in front of the Mongolian cavalry. One was a carnivorous wolf and the other was a herbivorous sheep. How could they be compared to each other? On the outer walls of the beginning city, after the initial panic, the 20,000 recruits began to gradually get into the role under the guidance of the First Army soldiers. Especially when they noticed that because the walls were too high, the enemy's infantry needed a certain amount of time just to climb the ladder. Because the walls were too high, it was difficult for the enemy's arrows to accurately hit the top of the city tower. Even if the arrows hit the top, they would not have much power and would not be a threat to them. After that, their courage became stronger and stronger. Some people said that most of the alcohol tolerance was trained, and in fact courage was the same. When they killed for the first time they would be nervous, scared, terrified and even have nightmares. However, after killing many people it would become a habit and they would realize that it was not a big deal. It was the same with archery. After the initial panic they realized that the enemy was not a threat to their safety. With the constant guidance of the First Army soldiers, once they experienced the initial nervousness of the war, many of them could perform the correct operation according to the training. In addition, not all of the 20,000 people were new recruits. Many of them were captives who had been on the battlefield before. They more or less had some combat experience. When everything became familiar again, the power of the bow and arrow could finally be unleashed. At least it was not like before where they missed 9 out of 10 shots. With the help of the shield carts, they quickly came to the corner of the city wall. Then it was time to set up the ladder and start the siege. Because the 5-star Army's performance was too poor, Korban's initial tentative siege became a real siege. Another 8,000 people and 2,000 soldiers were added to each side of the city wall. In addition, the limited amount of gunpowder and catapults were also prepared, and it looked like they were going to take down the city in one go. Speaking of which, the Mongolians were best at hurting and then robbing. Things like gunpowder were not something they could produce. The gunpowder that they had now was thanks to the Baiming army, which they left in Jingzhou city and left behind when they fled the city. Looking at the small amount of gunpowder that was robbed, Korban gritted his teeth and said fiercely, "Take out half of it and we will blast the 5-star Army today and let them know how powerful we are. Then the army will be ready to take down the city in one go." Chapter 981. Korban gave the order and the catapults were all in position. More and more siege infantry gathered below the city walls, their eyes flashing with excitement. It was as if they could already see mountains of gold and silver right in front of them, ready for them to take as they please. On top of the city gate tower, Xiaobei, who was almost a general without an army, personally went into battle. From a well-protected watchtower, he looked down with binoculars and saw the catapults ready for battle. He was shocked. "Quick, pass down the order. Everyone find a safe place to hide. At the same time, inform the new army's new recruit division's division commander Lu to prepare the division to attack." Korban had seen the soldiers' performance just now and he was more or less disappointed. But when he thought about how humans needed constant training to grow, his heart was filled with anticipation. Now that the enemy was about to use gunpowder to attack the city, how could he not know the danger? Even if he could pretend not to see and let the soldiers experience an even harsher battle, it would just be more casualties. But when he remembered what Yang Qindong always said, that soldiers had families and loved ones, and that every death in battle was a tragedy for that family, he decided that it was best to avoid the brunt of the attack. The order was given quickly, and as more and more city defenders found suitable places to hide, Korban's shouts from below the walls could be heard. With that order, hundreds of gunpowder bags rose into the air, whistling as they leapt towards the city walls. In an extremely short time, the rumbling of explosions rang out one after another. Some of them landed on the corridors of the city walls, bringing with them terrifying lethality. The battlements on the city walls that had been intact were blown apart one after another, scattering debris everywhere. Fortunately, the accuracy of the catapults was too poor. Less than a fifth of the catapults hit their targets. Most of the catapults exploded on the city walls. Some of them even fell to the ground before exploding, injuring many of their own men. Charge! Korban felt that the time had come, and with the might of the gunpowder, he gave the order for the entire army to charge. A total of 16,000 infantrymen from the 4 cities were stepping on ladders, shouting slogans and rushing up the city walls. On the city gate tower, the 20,000 new recruits had all retreated to a safe area. When they saw the tragic scene on the city gate tower corridor after the explosion, they all felt a wave of lingering fear. If they had not retreated just now, at least a few thousand people would have died or been injured because of that wave of attacks. While the recruits were still rejoicing that they had retreated quickly enough, the 8,000 veterans of the new recruit division had already charged out. Although the name was Recruit Division, most of the people who joined this place were veterans. When they arrived before the battlements, all of their footsteps were steady and their expressions were normal. Obviously, such a battle was like child's play to them, and it already couldn't cause any waves. Division Commander Lu Zhuo took the lead. He used a wooden fork that he had prepared beforehand to push away a ladder in front of him. Frantic shouts from several enemies who were climbing up the ladder could be heard. Using this opportunity, he lowered his head to look down at the city gate tower. He saw a dense group of enemies lining up to climb the ladder, and a strange smile flashed across his face. He reached behind his waist and a wooden grenade appeared in his hand. It was not just Lu Zhuo himself. Every one of the 8,000 soldiers he brought with him had one in their hands. It was given to them by the logistician when they went up the city gate tower that morning. Although each of them only had one, when 8,000 of them were put together, the power was terrifying enough. "Everyone get ready. I'll throw it down after I count to 3. Then, everyone crouch down with your hands on your heads as per our usual training. Listen up. 3 throw." After Lu Zhuo shouted the number 3, the grenade in his hand had already been thrown down the city gate in front of him. He then crouched down with his hands on his head. More than 8,000 grenades rained down from the sky. More than 2,000 grenades landed outside each of the city gates. More than 10,000 infantrymen who were climbing up the ladder were stunned by the formation in front of them. They did not know what this wooden hammer-like thing was. They only saw bursts of smoke and fire flashing past. Some unlucky soldiers were directly hit by the grenades and cried out in pain. But even so, no one made any dodging movements. This was the biggest disadvantage of limited vision. They had never even seen a grenade before. When they did not know what it was, the disastrous consequences were already destined. 3 seconds after Lu Zhuo and the others threw the grenades, a loud and deafening shout finally sounded, followed by flames that soared into the sky. When the power of more than 8,000 grenades was combined, the effect in the scene were very spectacular. Amidst the rumbling sounds, the earth trembled as a result. At this moment, the people of the first city could not help but look in the direction of the outer city gate tower with worry in their hearts. When they saw the bright 5-star army still fluttering in the wind on the city gate tower, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Before the war, it was said that as long as the flag was still there, the first city would not have any problems. All the worries could be put aside. The loud roar also alarmed the Walla Alliance army, who was waiting for news in the military tent. Xian walked out of the main tent with a frightened expression. He would never forget that such a powerful cannon had appeared outside the capital of Baiming. At one point he was dizzy and scared. Was history going to repeat itself? At this moment he suddenly had a regretful thought. The first city was the territory of the war god. How could it be taken down so easily? Outside the first city, the cavalry scouts of the Baiming army who were wandering nearby also felt the shock. At the same time, the news that the 5-star army had unknown weapons of mass destruction spread out. Under the first city, after a series of roars, everything quieted down again. Looking at this place, it was like purgatory on earth. The shield carts wrapped in cowhide had long been torn apart, and not a single complete ladder could be found. Not only these items, even the 16,000 infantrymen were blown to smithereens. Many of them couldn't even find a complete corpse. On the charred ground, there were only the occasional wails and screams of a few lucky but heavily injured soldiers. More than 8,000 grenades were thrown together, and even the thick soil was lifted 3 feet high, not to mention the soldiers made of flesh and blood. Under the powerful shockwave and airflow, no matter if they were standing on the ground or climbing up the ladder in midair, all of them were wiped out in one battle. General Korban's eyes were red as he staggered slowly to the battlefield. Looking at such a tragic scene, he could not breathe. His whole body straightened up and he fainted from anger. On the first day of the first battle, the morale of the besieging army was high. They wanted to fight a beautiful battle and take the lead. But who would have thought that it would end like this? The annihilation of more than 10,000 soldiers was like a heavy hammer that smashed on the head of the Walla army. It showed them the powerful combat power of the 5-star army. With such a heavy defeat, the siege on the first day naturally stopped. It attracted the cheers of the 20,000 new recruits on the city tower. Although they weren't the ones who created this outcome as witnesses, they felt honored to have witnessed it. After seeing the new recruits in action, they were filled with endless confidence. Even if they did not use advanced weapons like grenades, they were confident that they could defend the city and win. In contrast, the Ali army retreated 2 miles, as if they were afraid that such a destructive weapon would be thrown at their feet. In the main tent, Korban, who had fainted from anger, had woken up. The first thing he did was to ask for forgiveness and then to ask for battle. Prime Minister, this general is guilty. If I was not in a hurry to make a contribution, they would not have taken advantage of the loophole and inflicted such heavy casualties on us. When we attack the city in the future, I promise that we will not send too many people at once. We will not give them the chance to deal a heavy blow to our army. Also, this general believes that there aren't many of these powerful weapons in the 5-star army. Otherwise, they wouldn't have waited until after they were bombarded by us to use them. Korban, who had fainted and woke up, was obviously a lot smarter. He seemed to have thought through many things. Then when he looked at Apol, his face was filled with fighting spirit. After losing the first battle and suffering such heavy losses, he had to make a statement. Otherwise, even if he was killed according to military law, he would have nothing to say. When Apol learned that the siege army had been wiped out, he really wanted to kill Korban to prove his innocence. But considering that the battle was imminent, and that it was not auspicious to harm one's own general, and considering that few among the infantry commanders could compare to Korban, he finally suppressed his killing intent. Instead, he looked at Korban with a burning gaze. I'll give you one more chance. If you suffer such a crushing defeat again, you don't have to come see me. Kill yourself as an apology. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Prime Minister. Korban, who had just escaped death, thanked him profusely. His eyes flashed with rage. He had suffered such a huge setback this time and he had to get back at them. It was not only about his life but also his dignity. Having regrouped, Korban ordered his soldiers to clean up the battlefield and move away the broken flesh and bones. Then he called in a large number of shield carts and scaling ladders, and began another round of siege when it was 10 o'clock in the evening. After the previous experience, Korban had strictly controlled the number of soldiers he sent out each time. Usually he would send out 1,000 men each time and at most no more than 2,000. He would not give the enemy a chance to deal a heavy blow to him. Chapter 982. The siege of the city began day and night. Every day the sound of arrows piercing through the air could be heard from both the top and bottom of the city walls. The number of casualties also began to rise continuously. The smell of blood sprinkled on the city walls and did not disperse for a long time. The enemy became more obedient and the pressure on the recruits lessened. The recruits led by Lu Xue naturally did not attack. Instead they handed over the task of defending the city to the reserve soldiers, giving them ample opportunity to train. The two sides engaged in a back-and-forth battle. Under the attack of day and night, 3 days passed in a flash. Compared to the boldness 3 days ago, Korban's arrogance had been reduced a lot. He was prepared for a long siege. He wanted to see who would be the one to lose in the end if they continued to fight day and night. Nearly 300,000 soldiers stayed under the beginning city, and the amount of resources they consumed every day was astronomical. With so many people putting all their hope and reliance on the siege army, Xianxia felt a lot of pressure. Because of this he took the initiative to find Apu. However, before he could speak, Apu said, "Leader Apu, it seems that the walls of Origin City are high and sturdy. It won't be easy to take it down. Instead of wasting all our forces here, why don't we attack from multiple fronts?" Attack from multiple fronts? What do you mean, Prime Minister? Even though it was the same as what he thought, Xianxia still pretended not to know. Immortal was a wise prime minister and he was also a famous figure in the history of Xianxia. He saw that Xianxia knew but pretended not to know, but he did not point it out. Instead he pointed at the direction of North Desert City on the map and said, "I have sent scouts out in the past few days. North Desert City is also a bustling city. The investment is not less than the beginning city, but the number of soldiers is not as much as the Wrath City. There is only a 20,000-man army there, and it has just been formed for more than a year. It has not experienced any major battles. I think defeating them and taking down North Desert City should not be difficult for leader Xianxia." Take down North Desert City? Xianxia pretended to be interested. "Yes, take that place. Seeing that it will snow in a month, our army can't keep camping in the wild. If we can take down North Desert City, then we will have a place to stay. Then we can look for an opportunity to take down First City. In this way our chances of winning will increase by several %. What do you think?" Alip asked with a confident face. He was certain that Xianxia would agree to this request. After all, North Desert City was also very prosperous and it was also full of great temptation. Sure enough, Xianxia only thought for a moment before nodding in agreement. This was his original intention for coming here. Since it was to his liking, there was no reason for him to refuse. Not only that, he also used the excuse that the main forces were besieging the city, and that the losses were light, indicating that he would undertake the task of capturing Mo Bay City. At the same time he also made a promise that the things in Mo Bay City and the people and slaves would be equally divided between the two sides. He would never eat more than he wanted. Xianxia was probably the kind of person who said that trying to cover up would only make things more conspicuous. The so-called equal division was possible, but it would definitely not be fair. For the slaves obtained after capturing the city, the same number of people would be divided, but often the results would be different due to the difference in age and physique. How could the shrewd Alip not know this point? Considering that they were now allies and North Desert City had not been captured, it was not a good thing to have a gap on the issue of benefits. Alip nodded generously and said, "Okay, I believe in the promise of the Walla army. Then I will have to trouble leader Xianxia." You're welcome. Since we are allies, helping each other is a matter of course." Xianxia laughed loudly. After returning to the tent, Xianxia immediately ordered one of the 4 generals, Mu Tu, to give him 30,000 elite cavalry and let him go to North Desert City and occupy it. Remember, after occupying North Desert City, first distribute some of the young and able-bodied men to our harvest. Do you understand? Before capturing North Desert City, Xianxia was already thinking about the future. This was a kind of confidence but also a kind of disregard. As Alip said, he had also sent people to investigate. North Desert City only had 20,000 city guards. He sent 30,000 troops and had the advantage in numbers. In addition, the first city was surrounded. Presumably, North Desert City must have been in a state of panic. If they attacked it this time, there was no reason for them to lose. Mu Te, who was called, had a face full of confidence. He patted his chest and promised to complete the task. Early the next morning, he commanded the troops and headed in the direction of North Desert City. On the city tower, after an observation sentry discovered this change, he reported the news to Yang Chendong. After sending Wan Xiaoyu to the publicity team to rehearse the program, Yang Chendong came to the First City Academy to prepare for a lecture. The news came. After hearing it, he just smiled and said, "Some people just want to die. If that's the case, we just have to wait and see the result." As soon as he felt that the situation was not right, Yang Chendong arranged for the 1st Cavalry Division and the Tatar Division of the new army to go out of the first city and ambush on the road to North Desert City. Next was the battle to defend the city. There were very few times when the cavalry could be used. Since that was the case, it was better to send them to the battlefield where they should be. With this preparation, it was no wonder that he was so careless. The combat power of the 1st Cavalry Division was obvious to all. In addition, there was the assistance of the Tatar Division. Not to mention that there were only 30,000 enemy cavalry. Even if there were 80,000 or 80,000 enemy cavalry, they would still be heavily injured. In terms of the combat power of cavalry, the current 5-star army was difficult to be a match. Every day, the 1st Cavalry Division had just undergone an expansion. According to Yang Chendong's plan, the original 3 divisions had been reduced to 5 divisions, with a total of 10,000 people. Don't think that after the expansion the combat power would decrease. In the past few months, the division commander Tian, who had put all his energy into the recruitment assessment. In his eyes, only the most outstanding cavalry could enter this glorious group. As for what kind of background you had, if your requirements did not meet the standards, sorry, no one would be able to persuade you. Under the strict assessment, the number of 10,000 cavalry was finally gathered. Not only that, the new 4th Regiment and 5th Regiment commander also confirmed the final candidates through the assessment. Among them, the 4th Regiment commander was one of the students from the Yang Family Academy, and also Tian, whose classmate by Shuang. The 5th Regiment commander was Gong Feng, who had fought countless battles and was already the deputy division commander of the new army. This time, instead of being promoted, he was demoted to a regiment commander. However, he was so happy that his face was blooming with a smile. The 2 regiment commanders had gone through countless assessments. In the end, the other 3 regiment commanders also went on stage for a while before the final decision was made. Whether it was the individual quality or the military commanding ability, they had all been verified and the assessment results were excellent. Finally, the expansion of the 1st Cavalry Division was completed. They were eager for a big battle. They wanted to use victory to test their strength. In particular, the 6th young master Tian Hu had said that once the expansion of the army was completed, and the facts proved that the expansion was successful, he, as the division commander, would be awarded the rank of Major General for the first time. He would be the first person in the division to be promoted to Major General. Only being a Major General was not the final goal of Tian Hu, but to be able to break the limit of being promoted to a Major General was something he looked forward to in his heart. Waiting always felt like a long time. Fortunately, the enemy did not let him down. The scouts in the front reported that the 30,000 cavalry of the Wara were coming. Looking from afar, smoke and dust covered the sky and the earth, and the sound of shouting was endless. They're finally here. Under a big tree, the 5 regiment commanders who received the news all rushed over. Then they all looked at the division commander Tian Hu with an expectant face, waiting for the military order. Under everyone's expectant eyes, Tian Hu stood up straight and swept his eyes over the 5 regiment commanders one by one. Prepare to act according to the previous plan. Everyone, this is our first battle after the expansion of the army. I hope we can show our power and prestige. I hope that when the enemy hears the name of the 1st Cavalry Division in the future, they will know how to write the word fear. They will know what it means to be afraid without fighting. Please rest assured, Division Commander, we promise to complete the mission. The 5 regiment commanders saluted together. Their eyes were shining brightly, and their whole body was wrapped in an indescribable killing intent and fighting spirit. The first attack of the World Cavalry Division was different from the attack of other armies, divisions and regiments. They rarely differentiated between the main attack and the auxiliary attack. Whenever they encountered an enemy, they would attack together and kill fiercely. Facing 5,000 enemies, they would also send out the whole division. Facing 10,000 enemies, they would still send out the whole division. This time, facing 30,000 enemies, they still chose to send out the whole army. Moreover, before they set out, they had sent people to inform the nearby Tatar division to quickly circle around the enemy's rear. They could not let the enemy escape. Before the battle had even begun, the 1st Cavalry Division had already made a fable. The enemy would definitely not be a match for them and they would definitely lose. This was where their heroic spirit came from. After the division commander Tian who gave the order, the 5 regiment commanders led their soldiers to prepare for battle. While the other regiments were checking their horses and weapons, the 3rd regiment was praying to the heavens. With regiment commander Hubo at the lead, they were the first to kneel on the ground, facing the direction where Tuochuo Buhua had died. Tuochuo Buhua had been surrounded by the Wara army after being broken by the 5-star army, and had died after being hit by over 50 arrows. When the news came back, the 6th young master had said that he would definitely take revenge. This was why Hubo and the other Tatar tribesmen had decided to surrender. The majority of the members of the 3rd Regiment were the 30,000 elite soldiers under Tuochuo Buhua. When they had chosen to join the 5-star army, one of the most important requirements was that one day, they would be allowed to take revenge for Tuochuo Buhua. On this point, Yang Qindong had also expressed his agreement. Chapter 983. Now that the opportunity had presented itself, they naturally had to inform Tuo Buhua of this news. After the ceremony, the 3rd Regiment commander Hubo stood up and raised his saber, shouting to the Wala cavalry behind him, "Brave warriors, charge with me! Avenge the great Khan! Kill, kill, kill!" At this moment, shouts and roars filled the skies above the 1st Cavalry Division. 10 li away, in the midst of the charging Wala cavalry, General Mutuo couldn't help but shiver. A chill surged through his entire body. This caused him to habitually look around, but he didn't find any signs of the enemy. The sun hung high in the sky, shining down on people's bodies, giving them a scorching feeling. He chased away the chill. However, half an hour later the same feeling appeared again. Just as the army was advancing, the scouts at the front suddenly reported that a large number of cavalry soldiers wearing the 5-star army uniform had appeared. There were about 10,000 of them. "You're here to seek death? Then I'll grant you your wish. Come charge." When he heard that there were 10,000 enemies, Muter's eyes flashed with disdain. From his point of view, the Vala cavalry was the most outstanding and elite of all cavalry units. 10,000 against his 30,000, it was no different from throwing eggs at a rock. Since it was a fat piece of meat in his hands, he naturally would not let it go. With a shout, he gave the order for the entire army to charge forward. If Mutu had been more conservative at this time, and arranged the army into a defensive stance, even if they lost the following battle, it would not have been so tragic. His arrogance had caused him to make the wrong decision. The price of underestimating an opponent was always heavy. The facts proved this point. After another 15 minutes, the 1st Cavalry Division appeared with the red flag of the 5-star army. From afar they were also covered in smoke and dust. The sound of iron hooves stomping on the ground reverberated in the ears of every cavalry soldier. None of them were new recruits, and in such a situation not only did they not feel afraid, some even felt their blood boiling as if their adrenaline had increased by quite a bit. The 1st Cavalry Division finally appeared in front of the 30,000 Wala cavalry. Both sides had no intention of slowing down, and under the gallop of the cavalry, the distance between them became shorter and shorter. 2 li, 1 li, 300 meters, 200 meters. When they were 200 meters away, the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division prepared to fire their arrows. They relied on their superb equestrian skills and superb archery skills to make all sorts of fancy movements. While the enemy could not lock onto them, they were able to lock onto the enemy. When they were only 100 meters away, tens of thousands of arrows were fired at the same time. They came from different angles and in tricky ways, shooting into the formation of the Vola cavalry. The Vola cavalry charging at the very front were all hit by the arrows and fell to the ground one by one. Ambushing with arrows was the basic skill of every soldier in the 1st Cavalry Division. For those who wanted to join, the archery requirements were extremely strict. The requirement was to be able to hit the target 90% of the time while moving at high speed. In order to reach this standard, they didn't know how many hard bows they had strung. In the end, when they finally mastered it, not only could they inflict heavy damage to the enemy, but it was also very rare for 2 arrows to hit the same target. Choosing the target according to the position allowed them to achieve the maximum military goal of inflicting heavy damage to the enemy during the first round of arrow attacks. In fact, they also succeeded. Compared to the scattered arrows shot by the Walla cavalry and the uncertainty of the target, their first round of archery injured at least 1,000 of the enemy cavalry. Just this number of casualties alone was not comparable to other cavalry forces. After a round of archery, the cavalry charging at the front collided with each other. When the warriors of the 1st Cavalry Division rushed into the enemy cavalry with a sword and a shield in one hand, a one-sided massacre began. To be exact, these 16 words could describe the real scene on the battlefield. When they charged, they collapsed, they scattered, and when they scattered, they scattered, and when they scattered, they fled. When the arrows cut into the formation of the Walla cavalry like a sharp knife, the originally neat formation of the Walla cavalry immediately collapsed. Many centurions and even Kiliarchs who led the troops died tragically under the sharp knives of the 1st Cavalry Division before they could give the order to surround the enemy. Without their commander, the Vala cavalry began to fall into chaos. When the second batch of soldiers from the 1st Heavenly Cavalry Division charged over, the Vala cavalry had already lost their formation. The only thing the Vala cavalry could do was either wait for death or turn around and flee. In a cavalry charge, the most effective way to exert one's full strength was to continuously charge. Once there was no one to protect you on your left and right, it was likely to be the moment your life would end. So any experienced cavalry knew that once the companions on his left and right disappeared, it was time for him to escape. Under the Iron Law, the Walla cavalry that was disrupted retreated and quickly collided with the Walla reinforcements behind them. After a short period of chaos, the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division arrived. The scene repeated itself again. Collapse, scatter, chaos, escape. In the chaos, most of the attacks of the Walla cavalry were blocked by the shields. When the speed of the sword was not as fast as the enemy, and occasionally the sword would be blocked by the shields, more and more Walla cavalry were killed on their horses. More and more Walla cavalry began to show fear in their eyes and began to retreat. The main force of the Walla army behind them was also greatly affected. They could not even display half of their usual combat power. General Mutter in the middle of the army was surprised to find that the situation was completely different from what he had imagined. Even with such an advantage in numbers, they were still retreating. The situation had reached an irreversible situation. No matter how he gave orders, no matter how he shouted, it was impossible to reverse the situation. The soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division who rushed into the enemy camp were like wolves in a flock of sheep. While they swung their swords and slashed at the enemy, they enjoyed the same treatment as the soldiers of the Cold Front. Equipped with 7-star crossbows, they continuously raised their sleeves and fired arrows at the Walla cavalry who were fleeing. Amidst the sounds of arrows, one by one, the Walla cavalry that blocked the way fell off their horses. This scene increased the enemy's chances of defeat, and the morale of the Walla cavalry fell to the lowest point. Mutter's 30,000 cavalrymen were not lacking in individual combat power. Some of them had even fought with the elite cavalrymen of Tuolbuhua before. They could be said to have rich battle experience. But the moment they faced the 1st Cavalry Division, they still felt a sense of powerlessness. It was like a 3-year-old child facing an adult. No matter how courageous you were in the face of great strength, you still could not be a match. The front army was defeated, the middle army retreated, and the Walla rear army that was rushing over did not even have the chance to touch the sleeves of the 1st Cavalry Division before they frantically retreated with the main army. At this moment, the Walla cavalry was already dizzy from the beating, and there was only one word in their mind: escape. Only by escaping would they have a chance to regroup and fight again. This was not only the thought of the ordinary soldiers, but also the main commander of the army, Mutter, also had the same thought. Without fully estimating the strength of the enemy, the Walla cavalry that had lost the initiative could not organize an effective resistance formation. As the saying goes, a defeated army is like a landslide. No matter how many troops you have, once the chaos was set, the more soldiers there were, the greater the momentum of the defeat and the more irreversible it would be. Just like the Walla cavalry now, as if they were being chased by someone, the 30,000 cavalrymen retreated faster than when they came. The Tatar division had already galloped behind the Walla army. Zhou Xian, who was already a regiment commander, looked at the scene in front of him with a shocked expression and said, "This is too powerful, they didn't even have the ability to resist and they retreated like this. Is this still the powerful Walla cavalry that people are talking about?" The Tatar division commander Su He, who was riding beside Zhou Xian, also felt his scalp tingling when he saw the Walla cavalry constantly retreating without the slightest ability to fight back. While he was impressed by the might of the world's first cavalry division, he was also worried about his upcoming mission. Originally, one side had 30,000 people and the other side only had 10,000 people. Even if the side with more soldiers would definitely lose, but no matter what, they could still hold on. In this way he could lead the Tatar division to cut in from the rear and launch a pincer attack on the Walla cavalry from both sides. The reality was that the Walla cavalry couldn't even withstand a single blow, or it could be said that the 1st Cavalry Division was too brave and didn't even give the Walla soldiers a chance to fight back. Now these defeated soldiers were flying towards them, how could they block them? In the face of a cavalry that had completely lost their fighting spirit and had already retreated in defeat, anyone who stood in their way would have to bear extremely heavy pressure. So he was naturally clear about this. Next he had to order the Tatar division to move away from the main road and attack from the left and right flanks to kill as many enemies as possible and capture as many captives as possible. From the beginning to the end, Mudhole didn't even fight with the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division, and was constantly surrounded by the army and forced to retreat. When he saw the 5-star army appear from afar, he broke out in a cold sweat. If it was a normal time, he would consider what formation to use to attack or find the enemy's weak point. But now the army was only constantly retreating and no one would listen to his orders. The only thing he could do was to retreat with the army. As for how heavy the casualties would be after being blocked by the 5-star army, it was no longer something he could consider or change. Just like that, the Walla cavalry paid the price of heavy casualties and charged towards the arrows of the Tatar cavalry division. Countless cavalrymen and horses were shot and fell to the ground on the battlefield. Next, the 1st Cavalry Division and the Tatar Division joined forces and madly charged for more than 10 miles until there were too many captives kneeling in front and behind them. Only then did they have to give up the chase and turn around to clean up the battlefield. On the battlefield where close to 50,000 cavalrymen charged, the battle ended in just a little over 2 hours. Everything was like a joke. One side was brave and invincible while the other side was powerless. After spending a full 8 hours, the battlefield was cleaned up at night and the results were tabulated. In one battle they killed more than 4,000 enemies and captured more than 20,000. In the end, only Wuxia escaped the battlefield with 5,000 cavalrymen. For this, the 5-star army paid a very small price. The number of casualties didn't even reach 50. This battle fully displayed the invincibility of the 1st Cavalry Division. Even Division Commander Tian, who couldn't help but have a victorious smile on his face. He knew that not long after, his epaulette would be changed from 24 cents to a golden P. As for Wuxia, even if the 5-star army stopped chasing, he still ran with his 5,000 cavalrymen for more than 10 miles before stopping. He had no choice but to stop. After running for so long, he was tired and had no energy left to run. "No one is chasing us, right?" Wuxia jumped off his horse and casually sat on the ground. He still had a guilty expression as he looked at the darkness behind him. "There shouldn't be anyone chasing after us. We can't hear the sound of iron hooves," one of the 1,000-man commanders said with lingering fear as he glanced behind him. Chapter 984. It's good that they didn't chase after us. It's good that they didn't chase after us. At this moment, felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders, and he no longer looked like the brave general of World of Wara. Finally safe, panted for a while before calming down. Then he called a few of the Kiliarchs who escaped with him over and asked, "How many enemies do you think there are this time?" "About 20,000, I think." A straightforward chilly arch blurted out without thinking. As soon as he said that, Muter's face showed a very serious expression, and he seemed a little unhappy. I think there are at least 40,000. Another Chiliarch noticed the change in Muter's expression and quickly expressed his opinion. I think there are 70 to 80,000, or else how could our 30,000 army be defeated so quickly? As soon as the number of 40,000 was mentioned, another Chiliarch voiced a different opinion. Until now, Muter's expression became a lot friendlier. I think there are about 70 to 80,000. We fought for 2 days and 2 nights in this battle, and in the end we damaged more than 50,000 of the enemy's cavalry. After that we still had to retreat because we didn't have enough troops. Isn't that right, everyone? This was a blatant lie. Muter's usual personality was not like this, but he could not explain himself to Xianxia after being defeated, so this was the only way he could come up with to explain everything. This way not only would he not be at fault but he would also be rewarded. The general had set the tone and the other Chiliarchs did not want to be implicated by the defeat, so after a slight hesitation, everyone agreed to this fabricated fact. Soon they called the Chiliarchs and Centurions to agree on the same statement. A great defeat was described as a great victory, and this was considered a kind of art of war. Outside the beginning city the attack was still ongoing. This was already the 12th consecutive siege. After being heavily damaged by the large-scale destruction weapons on the first day of the siege, the infantry commander General Korban changed his attack strategy. Each time he would send at most 2,000 men to each side of the city wall, and with such a scale both sides fought back and forth with no clear winner. There were even a few times when they almost reached the top of the city wall. Under the repeated hope, Korban grew more and more tormented between hope and disappointment. When he had nothing else to do, he made a conclusion and was surprised to discover a fact. The defense of the 5-star army seemed to be sometimes strong and sometimes weak. Every 3 days the defense would weaken and then it would strengthen day by day. On the 4th day there would be another fact that the defense would become weak and strong. Korban could not understand why things had turned out this way. The only thing he could do was to continue attacking the city, paying a heavy price while trying to whittle away at the enemy's strength. Didn't the scout already say that? The enemy in the beginning city only had 40,000 soldiers. Even if he had to sacrifice 2 or even 3 of them, the final victory would still belong to him. Korban's is a good idea. But he did not know that the reason why he felt that the defense was strong and weak was because the soldiers guarding the city changed every 3 days. In the 12th day of the siege, the 5-star army had changed 4 batches of veteran soldiers, and the new soldiers who had experienced the 3-day siege had completed the process of metamorphosing into veterans, and then reported to the new Second Army. And from start to finish, the new Second Army's main force had not been mobilized. Unable to know the specific situation in the city, Korban could only probe again and again. Then another 10 days passed and the 5-star army defending the city was still weak and strong at times and no one could find the reason. Korban, however, was surprised to find that he only had 10,000 men left. After 22 days of siege, the original 50,000 soldiers were either dead or injured, and now there were only 10,000 who were healthy. He finally had to find Prime Minister Alip and ask for reinforcements. He did not expect the Korban to be so difficult to attack. At first he said that he would take the outer city in 3 days, but it had only been 3 days and not only had he not taken it, but he also did not have enough soldiers to attack the city. This made Alip very unhappy, but he could not think of a better way at the moment, so he had no choice but to replace the 20,000 cavalry with infantry and hand them over to Korban. Just as Alip was done with this, another message came and the 30,000 cavalry sent by the Wara had returned. But only 5,000 of the 30,000 returned, which meant that they might have been defeated when they attacked North Desert City. Muther had returned. He could have returned a few days earlier, but in order to show that he had indeed fought a hard battle with the 5-star army, he deliberately delayed it. This time he was summoned by Xianxia for questioning as soon as he returned to the camp. What happened? I gave you 30,000 cavalry and you only brought back 5,000 men. I want an explanation. Xianxia's eyes were cold and if Muther answered wrong he would raise his butcher's knife and start a massacre. Thinking that it was fortunate that he had prepared in advance, Muther tried his best to act as calm as possible and told the lie that he had made up earlier. After he was done, he even put on a mournful expression and said, "Lord Leader, this is all because the scouts' information was not good. That's why we suffered such heavy losses. 80,000 five-star army, where did they come from? Xian, who was frowning after hearing Muthar's explanation, was also stunned. Since when did North Desert City have so many five-star army? If that was the case, 30,000 against 80,000, and 5,000 managed to escape after wiping out 50,000 of the enemy's cavalry, it was not a small victory. I don't know. Mutuo shook his head innocently. Then, according to what he thought before, he pretended to be aggrieved and said, "Leader, do you think the war god has transferred the main army to North Desert City and left some infantry in the beginning city?" As the saying goes, one sentence can wake a person from a dream. He was instantly woken up by such a sentence. Thinking about it carefully, this idea was not unreasonable. More importantly, there was no other explanation other than this. "Okay, I understand. I will immediately meet with Apu and tell him the details." In order to shirk responsibility, Muthar came up with this excuse to facilitate Xian and Apu's meeting again, and at the same time, it sped up the destruction of the allied army. In the main tent, Xian invited Apu and told him what happened to Muthar, as well as his conjecture. "Prime Minister, it seems that our previous estimation was wrong. The cavalry of the five-star army is not in the beginning city. They only left behind infantry. This can also explain why we failed to attack the city and why we were defeated when we sent troops to North Desert City." Xian's words were reasonable, and the smart Apu was also misled into making the same judgment. Yes, that should be the case. It's just that the walls of the beginning city are high and strong. Even if they are infantry, what can we do if we can't break in? Seeing that Apu agreed with his judgment, Xian was very proud. In his eyes, Apu was very smart, and even he agreed with his judgment. There should be no five-star army cavalry in the city. If that's the case, the previous military plan should also be changed. "Prime Minister, this leader knows that you did your best, but as you said, when the war god built the beginning city, he probably considered the safety of the city, so it won't be easy to attack them. Since that's the case, we need to think of another way." "Think of another way." Apu's expression didn't change, but he was very curious. "But I don't know what the leader has in mind." "Haha, I have some ideas, but I don't know if it will work or not. I still need to ask the Prime Minister to give me some pointers." Xian chuckled. He did have a bold idea and he wanted to show it off in front of Apu. "The leader's idea can't be wrong, I'd like to hear the details." Apu saw that Xian was keeping him in suspense, so he simply satisfied the other party's request and said these words with a pleading expression. Apu's attitude was so humble that Xian was full of pride. He immediately laughed and said, "This is what I think. Attacking the beginning city with ladders is far from enough. Since that's the case, it's better to go to Baiming and get some cannons. With the help of these cannons, attacking the beginning city will be twice the result with half the effort. When the beginning city is in danger, the five-star army cavalry in North Desert City will have to reinforce them. At that time, we only need to attack them halfway and our plan will be successful. The encirclement is fake and attacking the reinforcements is real." Apu's brain turned very quickly, and he immediately pointed out the core of the problem. Attacking the reinforcements is real, and attacking the beginning city is also real. When the time comes, no matter which side makes progress, it will be our victory. Xian first shook his head, then nodded, and his eyes were full of smiles. This time Apu didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the feasibility of the matter. Thinking about the fact that they still had the advantage in terms of military strength, it was possible for them to start a war on both sides. As he wanted to agree. However, there was a bigger problem in front of him. "Will the Northern Ming army give us cannons? We don't want their cannons. Before, we found hundreds of cannons on the battlefield, but we didn't have enough ammunition. Now we just want them to hand over the cannons. And we don't want them for free. We can trade with them. We can use the extra warhorses in the army to trade. This is what they need, so there won't be a problem." Xian said confidently. "Warhorses for ammunition, but we don't have that many warhorses." As Arab spoke, he thought back to the 20,000 cavalry that he had just arranged to attack the city. Could it be that he had also planned to use his 20,000 warhorses first? Chapter 985. Xian chuckled and looked at Alip with ill intentions and said, "Prime Minister, I heard that in order to capture the first city, You have ordered 20,000 cavalry to be converted into infantry. Doesn't that mean that you have 20,000 war horses? Of course I won't take it for free. I've heard that there's a large horse farm in the south of the beginning city. There are hundreds of thousands of war horses in there. After we take down the city, I'll allow your army to pick 40,000 war horses first. How about that? As if worried that Alip would not agree, Xian directly offered double the price and then looked at the other party with an expectant look. Xian believes that this price will be able to move the other party. Alip only pondered for a moment before he nodded and agreed. These 20,000 war horses are indeed useless now. If that's the case, it's better to take them out to make a deal. Once they succeed, they will get more. Moreover, he also hopes to get the help of artillery. Otherwise, he really doesn't know when they will be able to capture the first city. After convincing Alip, Xian called one of the 4 generals, Ting Shu, and asked him to take 10,000 people to Sanbuchuan city to make a deal. Remember, 20,000 war horses in exchange for all the artillery shells in the city. Yes, Prime Minister. But what if they don't trade with us? Ting Shu asked. Tell them that the artillery is used to deal with the first city. Now we are all grasshoppers on the same rope. If the 5-star army is fine this time, I'm afraid that they will inevitably come to the 5-star army to settle the score. If they don't want to see such a result, it's better for them to obediently make a deal with us. And if they are unmoved, tell them that we will ally with Yang Chendong. They can think about the consequences themselves. Xian pulled a long face and said in an unfriendly tone. Ting Shu left, but to his surprise the deal went very smoothly. It's probably because the person in charge of Sanbuchuan city is now Deng Chong. Since the red barbarian cannons were no longer available, there was no need for him to keep the cannonballs. He might as well give them to the Ministry of Wara in exchange for war horses. The 2 sides were trading under the city gate. When the 20,000 horses were involved, it caused quite a commotion. Many people in Sanbuchuan knew about it. Shi Wanshan and the other generals also knew about it. However, they were under house arrest and couldn't do anything. The members of the security bureau in Sanbuchuan city heard about this matter. Considering the importance of this matter, they used the radio station to send the news to Shiqing. When Yang Chendong saw this news, Wangshan not only sent this telegram, but also one about Haiwu Division. He Gong, the commander of the 5th Division of the Navy's Cold Front, called. They had already passed through the Liaodu area and were now heading towards the first city. It's better to come at the right time. Yang Chendong looked at the telegram, which could be described as timely rain, and laughed heartily. Since the other party wanted to play with firearms, then he would let everyone know who the originator of firearms was. In front of Shiqing, Xian and Ali Pu began to mobilize their troops. Each of them sent out 50,000 cavalry. A total of 100,000 cavalry were stationed in the northwest of Shiqing. They were waiting for the arrival of the 5-star army's main cavalry. But at the same time, thousands of miles away in the south, a force of 6,000 cavalry appeared in the Shirhe River in the north of Ili. They were carrying the banner of the 5-star army, with General Narasong as their commander. They were quietly crossing the river. This was a surprise attack that Yang Chendong had arranged before the war. They crossed the mountains and came to the periphery of Ili from another direction. Next, they would launch an iron-blooded attack to take revenge for Ali Pu's attack on Shiqing. The telegram operator put away the telegram, came to Narasong and saluted. Deputy Division Commander Narasong, the 6th young master has called. He agreed to let us enter Ili and attack their hinterland. He asked us to create enough momentum. I'll call back the 6th young master. We promised to complete the mission. Na Raizong laughed excitedly. He turned around to look at the cavalry troops crossing the river and shouted, "Brothers, let's work harder. In at most 2 days we will be able to pull out our sabers and slaughter them all." Saihan Mountain. This mountain was once the dividing line between the 5-star army and the Baiming army. Ever since the allied forces of Wala and Ili appeared, it became an abandoned land. Looking from afar, one could still see the desolate appearance of the mountain. "General, should we rest here for a night before continuing? Our brothers are tired from being so careful." A Chiliarch walked to General Ting Shu with a fawning expression. Ting Shu rode on his horse and looked at the continuous drizzle above his head. When he saw the carriages loaded with cannonballs moving in a small line, he nodded. "It's good too. Our brothers have been rushing through the night for the past few days and are indeed tired. Let's let everyone have a good night's rest. However, pass down the order that the waterproofing of the carriages must be done well. We must not allow water to enter the cannonballs. General, don't worry. Thank you, General. The Chiliarch thanked him happily. Then he went down to pass down the military order. For a moment, cheers could be heard from the 10,000 troops. They were not afraid of rushing through the journey. However, they were worried about carrying gunpowder that could explode if they were not careful. Seeing that they were about to reach the first city and with the continuous drizzle, they might as well stop and have a good rest. They would continue to move forward when the weather cleared up. After the general gave the order to rest, the cavalry soldiers took out their tents. White tents sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain at the foot of Xihan Mountain. The 5-star army had originally built a road here. As the roadbed was higher than the ground, it would not be a problem even if it drizzled. Therefore, it became a good place for the Walla cavalry to rest. Just as the tents appeared one after another, 2 scouts from the 5-star army who were hiding in the distance quietly retreated and reported the news to their commander, Ding Shan. When the first city was closed, Ding Shan and the scouting group he led did not enter the city. Instead, they stayed outside and were responsible for gathering all the information outside. When the 5th Marine Division appeared on the grassland, Commander Ding Shan personally led people to welcome them and pulled them into an extremely safe jungle. Now Ding Shan and the commander of the 5th Marine Division He Gong stood in the temporary military tent and looked at the map. They were thinking about how to complete the mission given by the 6th young master. The 5th Marine Division was an army fully equipped with firearms. It had 4 regiments and 1 division under its command, totaling 8,400 people. Because when He Gong received the order, he was still maintaining the security of the Korean province. When he came, he left the 4 regiments behind. However, even if there were only 3 regiments and 1 division, the strength of their combat power was still shocking. Speaking of which, the Navy's Cold Front Division and the Army's Cold Front Division both had their own merits. For example, the Army's Cold Front Division was required to learn how to ride a horse in addition to fighting on land. On the other hand, the Navy's Cold Front Division was required to know how to swim in addition to fighting on land. However, it was undeniable that both sides had good abilities in fighting on land. After receiving the mission from the telegram to eliminate the 10,000 cavalry sent by the Walla to collect gunpowder, He Gong had been waiting for an opportunity to appear. If the Walla cavalry were all on horseback, it wouldn't be easy to annihilate them all without any signs of life. And once a large number of cavalries escape, I don't know if Commander Ding Shan can stop them? In the tent, He Gong asked Ding Shan with a serious face. Although he wanted to say that he would do his best, but there was no room for carelessness in war. Ding Shan could only shake his head. Commander He, our scouting group only has 2,000 people. If it is within this number, we are confident that we can stop them. But if too many of them escape, I'm afraid there is nothing we can do. I see. He Gong took a deep breath. Then if we want to complete the mission, we can only wait for them to stop. Although He Gong said that, he did not have much confidence in his heart. After all, 4 hours ago he received news that the Walla cavalry was about to arrive at Mount Saihan. From there to the outskirts of Beginning City, it would only take more than a day's journey if they hurried. Perhaps in order to return to camp as soon as possible, they would not stop at all and would not create the most suitable opportunity for him to annihilate the enemy. He Gong thought about how the 6th young master had high hopes for Hai Wuxia. If he couldn't complete the mission well, how would he have the face to meet the 6th young master again? He Gong's gaze fell on the map again. For the sake of the mission, he had no choice but to take the risk. Report. At this moment, the newly sent scout outside the tent returned with the latest news. Ting Shu's 10,000 cavalries and dozens of carriages of artillery shells had stopped at the foot of Mount Saihan due to the continuous rain. They stopped. After hearing the report, He Gong's eyes lit up with excitement. Then he laughed and said, Good, it's good that they stopped. Commander Ding, it's time for us to show our skills. That's right, Commander He. Everything will go according to the previous plan. Ding Shan was also very excited. Cavalries were afraid of moving. If that happened, it would be too difficult to lock onto the target, increasing the difficulty of annihilating them altogether. However, if they stopped, everything would be another story. A division commander and a commander immediately ordered the troops to set off. Their target was the foot of Mount Saihan. At the foot of Mount Saihan, the 10,000 cavalries led by Ting Shu did not know that they had become the target and prey. The light rain outside had turned into moderate rain. After rushing for days, the moment the tents were set up, they rested inside. Many of them had even slept during the day. As the general leading the troops, Ting Shu did not have the intention to reprimand them. The soldiers were working very hard and it was good to have a chance to rest more. Moreover, this place was not far from Beginning City. He had 10,000 cavalries, so he did not think that there would be any danger in resting here. Even if the 5-star army appeared, he would still be able to fight back. Moreover, there was no information that indicated that the main force of the 5-star army would be here, so he had nothing to worry about. Chapter 986. In the rain, the C5 Division soldiers dressed in the same raincoats appeared near Mount Saihan according to plan. The heavy rain increased the secrecy of their movements, but at the same time, it also increased the difficulty of their march. They wore rain boots and raincoats to keep the rain off their heads. 3 regiments and 1 battalion, more than 6,000 soldiers arrived at the foot of the mountain according to the original plan. They could already see the resting Walla camp from afar. "Commander, they didn't discover our presence. Can we continue with the plan?" A company commander in charge of reconnaissance came to He Gong and asked for instructions. "Yes, order the 5 battalions of the 1st Regiment to spread out in different directions toward the enemy camp. The 2nd and 3rd Regiments, plus the battalions, stay at the periphery and eliminate any enemies that escape. In addition, go and inform Commander Ding Shan. Tell him to make preparations. We must not let any fish escape the net." He Gong nodded his head with a dignified expression. Whether or not they could complete the 6th young master's mission depended on this. The regiment that received the order began to rapidly approach the target in the rain. They first crept closer to the enemy camp. When they were only 300 meters away, they could still see clearly even in the rain. Then they switched to the standard military movement and slowly approached the enemy camp. How to approach the target as close as possible without disturbing the enemy was something that every cold warrior had to do. All kinds of military movements were skillfully carried out one by one. The distance between them and the enemy camp was getting closer and closer. When they were only 200 meters away from the enemy camp, the 95 style in their hands could completely unleash a powerful effect. Only then did they stop one by one. Then they spread out in a long snake formation. The 2,000 soldiers were divided into 5 groups and surrounded most of the enemy camp's tents. Among them, the area near the carriages was the closest. Prepare the rocket launchers. Dozens of carriages were about 100 meters away from them. From time to time they could see Walla cavalry patrolling the surroundings. A regiment commander issued an order, but the rain covered his voice. The sound of the rain could cover up the voices of the people, but it couldn't cover up the earth-shattering explosion that followed. A single rocket launcher streaked across the rain and hit one of the transport carriages. The fire exploded, and under the chain reaction the gunpowder in the carriages was ignited one after another. One after another, huge roars and explosions were heard. Amidst the sky full of explosions, the carriages were torn apart. With the support of enough gunpowder, a corner of the entire camp was instantly flattened. It was estimated that at least a few hundred Vola cavalry nearby were directly swallowed up. At least a few thousand warhorses were startled and began to run wildly in all directions. Even if there were tents set up in front of them, they couldn't stop them from running wildly. In the process, who knew how many tents were overturned, and who knew how many Vola cavalry who came out of the camp to check out the situation were trampled over. Chaos began. Attack. The first leader gave the order, and the 5 fire dragons began their one-sided massacre. Those Walla cavalry who came out of the camp in panic became targets one by one. They were hit by bullets and blood spilled on the ground. Outside there were horses roaring and rampaging. Inside there were bullets passing by, taking away people's lives. Ting Shu, who was in the main tent, panicked. At this moment his face was pale and he looked nervous. He suddenly reached out and grabbed a captain who was running in front of him and asked, "What's going on? What happened?" "General, I don't know, everything is a mess. Mrs. Qian's face was full of panic. The fire just now was too dazzling. Under the deafening sound, her ears were still a little deaf and she couldn't hear what others were saying. Don't panic, the explosives are destroyed. This is clearly done by the 5-star army. We have to find a way to kill our way out and tell the leader about this. In this way, gather the cavalry. Their main force is either blocked in the first city or North Desert City. It is impossible for any army to appear here. Ting Shu was worthy of being one of the 4 generals chosen by Walla. Soon he became clear-headed and then he kept shouting to reorganize the army's morale. The most important thing for an army was the stability of the army's morale. As long as the morale of the army was still there, they would have the power to fight and have the possibility of turning defeat into victory. Ting Shu's shout quickly gathered several captains, dozens of captains, and a cavalry team of 5,000 to 6,000 people began to gather. When these people found their horses and stood with their swords, Ting Shu, as the main general, didn't have the slightest hesitation, and he didn't have the intention to wait for the others. He looked at the direction of the first city and swung his sword. The target is the first city. All troops attack. A regiment of Cold Front warriors used a surprise attack to stop the enemy that was twice their number. When nearly 6,000 Walla cavalry rushed out of the camp, the real resistance began. With Commander He Gong as the head, the 2nd Regiment, the 3rd Regiment, and the Division's battalion, a total of 4,400 people appeared in front of Ting Shu. Just like the direction of Ting Shu's attack was the first city, the direction of He Gong's defense was also the direction of the first city. The two sides inevitably met and then there was a burst of gunfire. One by one, the Walla cavalry were overturned from their horses and were hit by bullets. Their bodies were stained with blood. The brave and good cavalry didn't even see the shadow of their opponents. They fell from their horses and went to see the Tingri that they believed in. The sound of gunfire burst out and the cavalry fell on the charging road with blood. However, at least half of the cavalry rushed out of the encirclement. This was the advantage of the cavalry. Their speed was extremely fast, especially when they had a clear target. They could completely ignore the blockade of guns and rush out. Fortunately, Commander He Gong had already anticipated this possibility. He Gong had set up a total of 3 blockades. Just now, the enemy only broke through the 2nd Regiment's blockade. Then the cavalry rushed out and met the 3rd Regiment soldiers. Gunfire sounded again and countless lives were lost. Under the 2nd blockade, more than 3,000 cavalry left half of the corpses. When they rushed to the 3rd blockade, Ting Shu had less than 2,000 cavalry with him. Commander He Gong didn't hesitate to lead the division's battalion to open fire. Among them there were as many as 6 machine guns. They formed a bullet net and blocked the direction of the enemy's advance. One of the machine guns was aimed at Ting Shu and his warhorse. Unlike the clash between cavalry, Ting Shu had close to 100 bodyguards around him. They could very well protect the commander's safety. However, under such a blockade of gunfire, the effect of the bodyguards was negligible. Especially after the cavalry formation was disrupted one after another, there were not many bodyguards who could block in front of Ting Shu. When faced with the gunfire of the 95 machine gun, this one of the 4 generals that Yes Hen thought highly of was locked on by the gun muzzle. The bullets mercilessly shot into his body, causing Ting Shu, who was still lying on the horse, to tremble involuntarily. Just like the old saying, no matter how good one's martial arts were, one was still afraid of a kitchen knife. In the face of bullets that were many times more lethal than kitchen knives and bullets, the so-called kung fu became a joke. There wasn't even time for you to show off your knife skills. General Ting Shu was shot and fell off the horse. Even at the last moment before his death, his gaze was still looking in the direction of First City. His eyes were filled with unwillingness. Ting Shu was dead, but there were still many cavalry who rushed out of the blockade. There were about 1,000 of them. Their lives would be left to the reconnaissance group at the last layer of defense. The leader of the reconnaissance group, Ding Shan, had already gathered 2,000 soldiers under his command and was ready for battle. When he saw nearly 1,000 panicked enemy cavalry rushing out, he did not hesitate to wave his sword to meet them. The final massacre began. Those who could become scouts were originally outstanding talents in the army. It was no exaggeration to say that in order to gather the 2,000 people of the reconnaissance group, Ding Shan's efforts were no less than that of Division Commander Tian Hu of the 1st Cavalry Division. Therefore, when the morale, ability, individual quality and number of soldiers were inferior, the result of 2,000 against less than 1,000 was already destined. The 3-3 military formation played a great role. One by one the Walla cavalry was entangled, surrounded and killed. After more than 2 hours the battlefield returned to calm. The 10,000 Walla cavalry, under the strict military plan, did not escape in the end. According to the previous agreement, they still had important things to do next. He Gong and others did not need to take captives, so some of the injured and some of the surrendered Walla cavalry would eventually face a result that they had to face whether they wanted to or not, and that was death. Not a single one of the 10,000 Walla cavalry managed to escape. Even the General Ting Shu died in battle. Division Commander He Gong and Commander Ding Shan looked at the expected result. The two of them breathed a sigh of relief. In the end, they did not disappoint the 6th young master's hope and completed the mission. Okay, immediately send power to the 6th young master. The matter is done. We will continue to complete the mission according to the plan. After giving the order to the electrical operator, He Gong looked at Ding Shan and said, Commander Ding, the uniforms and other things are ready, right? It's all ready. Ding Shan stood at attention and replied. Good, then we will proceed according to the plan. He Gong nodded and began to instruct the soldiers to dig a large hole. This time it was not an easy task to bury 10,000 enemy corpses. More importantly, while burying the corpses, they had to mix in some of the Northern Ming Army's uniforms. That's right, they had to frame the Walla army and create a false impression that the Baiming army was the doing of the Walla army to destroy their so-called alliance. The rain continued for 2 days and 1 night and finally it cleared up again. The attack under the beginning city began again. After a series of unsuccessful attacks, Korban helplessly went to Prime Minister Arab and asked him where the Baiming army's red coat cannons were transported to. Chapter 987. Alip then went to the Walla army's main tent and met with Chief Yes Hen. Chief, the beginning city's walls are high and sturdy. If it weren't for the heavy weapons we wouldn't have been able to fight this battle. But I wonder where the Northern Ming artillery shells that we need have been transported to? Prime Minister, I'm also worried about this matter. Yes Hen said with an ugly expression. According to General Ting Shu's previous report, they should have arrived at the barracks yesterday. However, due to the rain they might have arrived a day or 2 later. But it doesn't matter. Now that the rain has stopped and I've sent out a team to receive them, the shells should arrive at the barracks soon. When that time comes I'll inform you immediately. How about that? Seeing Yeshen's words, Alip couldn't force him anymore. He could only nod. Alright, since that's the case I'll wait here for your good news. Haha, there will definitely be good news, Yes Hen said confidently. But soon news came that the cavalry had gone to receive them. However, even after rushing to the foot of Saihan Mountain, they still didn't see anyone. That's impossible. When the news was reported to the main tent, Yeshen's eyes flashed with worry, but he would never admit it. You must have gone the wrong way and missed General Ting Shu. How about this? Send more people to search. Search inch by inch. Don't let go of any suspicious places. After many years of leading troops, Yes Hen knew very well what it meant to have an accident on the battlefield. However, Ting Shu had 10,000 cavalrymen with him. How could he disappear without a trace? There must be a problem somewhere. The facts soon proved Yeshen's guess. After the scouts received the order, they searched carefully and found that the soil at the foot of Saihan Mountain was very loose. With suspicion they dug up the soil and revealed the corpses of the 10,000 cavalry soldiers. The news was quickly reported to Yes Hen. He was shocked and asked someone to invite Alip to discuss the matter. After all, the other party had sacrificed 20,000 war horses. An explanation had to be given. After Prime Minister Alip received the news, he quickly came to Yeshen's main tent. As soon as he entered, he lost his usual calmness and asked anxiously, Chief, what happened? I heard that General Ting Shu and the others are in danger? Yes. Yes Hen lowered his head. His face was heavy with anger. What's going on? We spent 20,000 war horses to exchange for those shells. Alip saw Yes Hen admit everything and questioned him. This time he had been waiting for these cannons to be used as an emergency. Now that he was told that there were no more, what was he supposed to do next? Seeing that Apu wanted to condemn him, he raised his head and said with a displeased expression, "Prime Minister, please remember not only did we lose 10,000 horses, we also lost 10,000 cavalrymen. In terms of losses, our losses are much greater than yours." When Xianxia got angry, Alip realized that there was something wrong with his attitude. His tone softened a lot. "Yes, I deeply sympathize with your heavy losses. But what's going on? No matter what, there needs to be an explanation. That was 10,000 cavalry soldiers. How could they be wiped out just like that? What's more, no one came back. This is too abnormal." "It's indeed abnormal." Xianxia agreed with this point of view. Then he asked with a trace of suspicion, "Prime Minister, do you think it was done by the 5-star army?" 5-star army? Alip was stunned at first, then he shook his head and said, "Didn't we already confirm that their main force is in the direction of North Desert City and Beginning City? How could they have the strength to arrange an ambush in the south of Beginning City? If they really have such great ability, then why would they defend the city?" "I don't think so." Alip was a smart person. Normally he wouldn't directly express his opinion on some things. But as long as he understood the situation in front of him, he could see that the 5-star army was already weakened. They didn't have the strength to fight back. He wasn't the only one who thought this. Xianxia also had the same idea. It's just that he couldn't think of any other reason, so he just casually probed. When he heard Alip's answer, he nodded and said, "Yes, the 5-star army shouldn't have the strength to do so. Although the 10,000 cavalry soldiers led by Ting Shu weren't the most elite force, they weren't just for show. To kill all of them without leaving a single one alive, it would take several times the number of soldiers. The 5-star army doesn't have the strength to do so." After eliminating the possibility of the 5-star army committing the crime, Alip and Xianxia separately thought of another force, which was the Baiming army. Comparatively speaking, Saihan Mountain wasn't far from Tulu City. They had also heard that the 200,000 reinforcements of the Baiming army had arrived from the capital. Could it be that they suddenly attacked and killed Ting Shu and the others? Although they were allies now, when there was a conflict of interests, anything could happen. That was 10,000 Walla cavalry with 10,000 war horses. In addition, there were so many artillery shells. It wouldn't be strange for them to do anything. As the saying goes, there are no eternal enemies or friends, only eternal interests. For the sake of interests, who could say for sure what the Baiming army would do? Just when the two smart people had their suspicions, but they still lacked evidence. The scout who had gone to investigate the corpses had returned with the evidence they wanted. It was a small number of Baiming army uniforms found in the graves. But because the enemy was afraid of leaving evidence behind, they had set the bodies on fire. Even the corpses were in tatters and it was impossible to see how they had died. Even the Baiming army uniforms were in the hands of the Walla cavalry, leaving behind some evidence and hope. "Bastard, I didn't think they really did it." Xianxia angrily slammed his fist on the wooden table in front of him. He had already guessed before, and now that there was evidence he no longer doubted it. Lip was also angry. Although it didn't seem right that the Baiming army would take such a huge risk for 10,000 war horses, the reality was that the facts were right. However, the truth was right there and he had no choice but to believe it. Then there was a problem. The Baiming army had already made a move behind them, so they were no longer safe. Between the Baiming army and the 5-star army, they could be attacked from both sides at any time. If that was the case, they had to take action. Otherwise, it would be too late once the situation was settled. What should we do? Do we still need to send people to Tulu City to investigate the situation? Xianxia asked conservatively. Tulu City has been sealed off for a long time. Our people couldn't get in before, and now something like this has happened. Even if they could get in, they probably wouldn't let them out. This kind of investigation is meaningless. Apu shook his head. With his foresight, he believed that all investigations were unnecessary. On the contrary, doing this would only delay the army's retreat. That's right, then what should we do? Retreat? When he said this, Xianxia's voice carried a hint of unease. We will retreat. But before we leave, we have to take some things with us. I've already sent people to check. Some of the more than 300,000 mu of grain fields in the north of the origin city have already ripened. If we move fast enough, we can still snatch some of it. This way we can solve the problem of our own lack of food and fodder and also deal a heavy blow to the origin city. We can make them fall into a food shortage in a short period of time and delay their development. Apu said with some reluctance. Since it was confirmed that the first city was difficult to capture, even if they went to the North Desert City, it would be a risky move. They could only take a step back and snatch what they could first. This was the best way and the only thing they could do. Although he had brought a lot of provisions this time, the more life-saving things he had, the better. Thus he immediately nodded. And I agree with this idea. Then let's do it like this, we will send 10,000 cavalry to snatch the food. We will only give them 7 days. As for how much they can snatch, it all depends on their ability. How about it? Well, after we snatch our own food, we will burn the rest that we can't take away. In any case, we can't leave it to the 5-star army. Alip added. That's good. While using these 7 days, we can also transfer all the cavalry back from the northwest line and get ready to retreat at any time. Xianxia said this, and he had already confirmed everyone's decision to retreat. A thunderous siege operation was destined to end in failure. After the two leaders reached a consensus, they each sent 10,000 cavalry to the food base in the north of the first city. But the next thing didn't go well. Facing the yellow food, they actually had difficulty moving forward. This didn't refer to how many 5-star army were guarding here, it was because there were too many mines. They only advanced 2 or 3 miles and each of them paid the price of hundreds of cavalry. According to the report, there seemed to be a lot of mines buried in the ground that could throw their soldiers into the air. If they wanted to go all the way, they were afraid that it was far from being able to do it in a short time. When the news came back, Xianxia and Alip both scolded Yang Qindong's cunning. Obviously, this was a trap that should have been set up long ago, but because they wanted to wait for the food to mature, they ignored it. If we can't get it, then let's destroy it. Don't we still have some explosives and catapults? Drive them over and blow it to the ground. With the idea of both sides suffering, Xianxia made a ruthless move. Chapter 988. This kind of thankless work, if it was in the past, Aper would never do it. He was a politician and he valued the overall situation more. He valued how much he could get in return for his efforts. There was no point in doing things like this where he could not get anything even if he put in a lot of effort. It's just that they didn't get any benefits from the battle of the first city. On the contrary, the original 50,000 siege infantry were almost wiped out. Since they couldn't take down the city, they needed an explanation. Then let's destroy it. Alip made this difficult decision and arranged for people to do it. But before he gave the order, a new information was sent to him. This made Aper, who didn't change his expression even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, turn pale with fright. He finally didn't dare to think about other things and decided to leave immediately. Once again he came to Yeshin's main tent. Aper anxiously said, "Leader, this Prime Minister just received news that the main cavalry of the 5-star army has entered our Ili kingdom. Now they are burning, killing and looting. They have threatened the safety of the king, so I received an order to rush back." The sudden change also caught Xianxia off guard. At first he thought that Apu was afraid and wanted to leave first so that he could bring up the rear. But soon after, the informants he had left in the Ili kingdom also sent him the same message, so he knew that this matter was not fake. Aper knew that Xianxia was just going through a procedure. He didn't care whether the other party agreed or not. This time he must leave. Therefore, after meeting with Xian, he turned around and left to make arrangements for the army's retreat. As for other things, of course he didn't have the heart to care about them. In order to hurry back, he even threw away some shield carts and ladders. For Aper, less than 5,000 of the 50,000 infantry were basically wiped out, so there was no need to take these things away. When Aper came, he had 200,000 soldiers, but when he left he only took 125,000 soldiers, 100,000 cavalry, 5,000 infantry and 20,000 cavalry. In addition to the 45,000 infantry that were destroyed in the siege of the first city, he and Keegan lost nearly 30,000 cavalry. In this battle not only did he not get any benefits, but he also lost so many soldiers. Could be called a failure. Aper left very quickly. He was so worried about the safety of the king and his base that it only took him a day and a half to order a retreat. His departure made Yeshin's Wara army a lone army. Although it was said to be a lone army, they still had about 135,000 cavalrymen under their command. Of the 30,000 cavalrymen who attacked Mulbei, 25,000 were killed. Ting Shu's 10,000 cavalrymen who returned from Sanbuchuan were completely annihilated. First, he relied on the fact that his subordinates were all cavalrymen, and that his base in the Hetao region had not been attacked by the northern Ming army, so he was more relaxed than Ali Pu. He even didn't forget to bombard first. Since he was going to leave, he had to leave something behind. Otherwise it would be a big loss. Under Yeshen's order, the 5,000 cavalry dismounted and became infantry. They pushed the heavy catapults and rushed out of the first city. He wanted to do this under the eyes of First City. He wanted to discuss Yang Chendong. The movements outside the city were updated every hour and sent to Yang Chendong. When he heard that Aper had led the Ili army to retreat, and Yes Hen stubbornly wanted to take his grain fields, he had the urge to immediately send troops. Speaking of which, after a month and 8 days of defensive battles, batch after batch of veterans were recruited into the new Second Army. The new Second Army had basically taken shape under the preparations of the commander. It had the 1st Cavalry Division, the 2nd Cavalry Division, the 3rd Cavalry Division, and the Infantry Division, a total of more than 33,000 people. In addition, there were nearly 20,000 people in the new Second Army's main force, as well as the 1st Cavalry Division and the Tatar Division outside the North City. Now he had more than 60,000 soldiers in his hands. If he launched a counterattack with all his strength, he had some confidence in winning. However, it could only be said that he had confidence and the chances of winning were not very high. Furthermore, the cavalry that he had brought with him were all elite troops that had fought alongside him for many years. The remaining 135,000 men were already twice the number of his own men. If he were to attack recklessly before they were fully prepared, it was very likely that both sides would suffer losses. Either they didn't fight or they had to fight and win. This was Yang Chendong's thinking. As for the more than 300,000 mu of grain fields outside the North City that needed time to prepare, it was necessary. Compared to these material things, Yang Chendong valued the lives of the soldiers more. Come, immediately send a message to Division Commander Xin Honghai in North Desert City. Ask him to bring all the cavalry that he can to the first city to provide assistance. This time I want to inflict a heavy blow on the Walla army and let them know how stupid it is to choose our 5-star army as an opponent. Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with a strong fighting spirit. He wanted to establish the myth that the first city was invincible through this battle. He wanted to completely solve the security problem of the first city through this battle and also dispel other people's thoughts of attacking the city. After the telegram was sent out, Division Commander Xin Honghai in North Desert City, while mobilizing the cavalry in his hands, informed the leaders of the big tribes near North Desert City that it was time to fight a smooth battle. Those who wanted to take advantage of the situation could join in. In the last battle, when they were dealing with Tuoro Buhua, they successfully created an elite 1st Cavalry Division among the elites. At the same time, the small tribes of North Desert City that were weaker were dealt a devastating blow. Now there were not many independent tribes left near North Desert City. Usually everyone lived in harmony. Division Commander Xin Honghai was very self-respecting. Whenever something happened, he would discuss it with everyone, so he also had a good relationship with people here. This time he took the initiative to stand up and said that if there was any merit, he could share it with everyone. If there were benefits, everyone could take it together. How could anyone not respond? At that moment, under the leadership of Xin Honghai, more than 6,000 men and horses were gathered. Including the Maobei division, there was a total of 20,000 cavalrymen. After receiving the news, they marched straight to the direction of Shur City the next afternoon. At this moment, Yes Hen did not know about this. He just arranged for people to keep an eye on the outside of Tulu City. He was only worried about the 200,000 reinforcements of the Baiming army. As long as these people did not come out, he could still dominate the first city and do whatever he wanted. What Yes Hen wanted to do now was to bombard hundreds of thousands of mu of grain fields. Even though he didn't have a lot of gunpowder in his hands and the range of his explosion was limited, he still stubbornly did it. In his view, this was him waving a knife to cut his own inner demon. Since he was defeated in the Battle of Baiming 6 years ago, Yang Chendong had become a demon in Yeshen's heart that could not be removed. Now that he finally had a chance to wipe away the shame, how could he let it go? Moreover, he had surrounded the first city for more than a month, which proved that the Duke of Loyalty was not omnipotent and could not be defeated. As long as he found the right way, he could also make the other party become honest. In this battle, Xian even thought that if the first city was not too sturdy, he would have been able to defeat Yang Chendong this time. With this thought, Xian did not leave immediately. Instead, he waited to bombard the grain fields and let Yang Chendong know what it meant to be helpless before leaving. He thought that he was showing off, but he did not know that he was standing on the edge of a cliff. The first city and Maobei City were thousands of miles apart. Xin Honghai led 20,000 cavalrymen and traveled day and night. In less than 3 days they arrived at Wanda City, which was north of the first city. There they met up with the world's best cavalry division and the Tatar division. They were only given a night's rest. Early the next morning, nearly 40,000 cavalrymen led the division and headed straight for the Walla encampment in the direction of the first city. At this moment, Xian was still busy bombarding the fertile fields. All the trebuchets were set up yesterday and officially started this morning. At this moment, Xian's eyes flashed with a crazy light. He wanted to use this action to tell the world that he was not afraid of Yang Chendong and was even stronger than Yang Chendong. At the same time, which was the morning of this day, the 6 100mm mortars of the logistics division in the first city were being tested in the central square of the city, which attracted the attention and curiosity of countless people. This was the first time that many people had seen this pure iron weapon in front of them. To them, the Northern Ming Army's red barbarian cannons were already very advanced, not to mention the cannons that were many times more advanced than the red barbarian cannons, which could hit targets more than 10 li away. The 100mm mortars of the 6 Gates Regiment were placed in the square, surrounded by soldiers from the logistics division who were responsible for maintaining law and order. There were many people standing in the distance. They wanted to see how this thing spat out fire and how it killed the enemy. As one of Yang Chendong's servants, Yang Si had learned from Yang Chendong professionally and systematically. It could be said that he was an artillery expert. This time, the matter of firing the cannons was naturally handed over to him. After finalizing the ruler, the scouts had already accurately marked the coordinates of the Walla cavalry's encampment. This time they aimed at the enemy's main camp. Once the cannons were fired, it would mark the beginning of the all-out counterattack. At 9 o'clock in the morning. At this moment the sky was covered with dark clouds again, indicating that a heavy rain was coming. Yang Chendong sat in the corridor of a courtyard in the Yang residence. He looked up at the sky and sighed softly. This is a heavy rain. Perhaps this heavy rain can wash away the coldness and cruelty of war. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.